How did your parents manipulate you to make parenting easier? When I was young, my parents brought home this very fancy maple syrup from Toronto, and I fell in love with it. We used it a few times, and then they told me it had run out, so we were using a normal version like Aunt Jemima's or something. Apparently, I threw a temper tantrum. From then on, I'd be a little monster if we didn't use the expensive syrup. Today, we made waffles while I was visiting home for a week, and my mum mentioned how she had just put Aunt Jemima's back into the fancy maple syrup bottle, and how I'd always say something like, "See, Mum, I can taste the difference." For 10 years, my parents have been laughing at my jerkishness. When I was a kid, we'd take long family trips to Ohio to visit my grandparents. I absolutely loved these trips. My grandparents had all sorts of cool stuff in the house, 2 big apple trees in the front yard, and they lived next to a train track. My grandpa also loved Golden Grahams. Every time my brothers and I would visit, he'd open his cupboard to reveal 4 or 5 boxes of Golden Grahams, explaining how much he loved them and that he got extra boxes just because we were visiting. I always thought it was so cool that my grandpa, who was, old, had the same favorite cereal as me. I'd always feast on cereal every time we went to visit. Of course, years after he died, I was relating this story to someone, and the obvious dawned on me. Later, I asked my mother if Grandpa even liked Golden Grahams, and she got this big smile on her face, looked a little sad, and said, "No, but he knew you did." It broke my heart. Still the story I tell when I remember him. When I was a kid, I had a pet hamster that I loved, as he'd walk up my arm and sleep on my shoulder. Fast forward to age 16, my dad and I were talking about my childhood, and he let slip, "Oh, you mean hamster 1 or hamster 2? What?" was my reaction. Turns out my dad accidentally left my hamster's cage in the sun and my hamster dehydrated. Then, to make it better, they had the cage on their bed as they were deciding what to do, and I came in, pet the dead hamster and said, "Bye, I'll see you later after school." My dad went to get a new hamster that day, and when I got back from school, he said I was ecstatic that my hamster got bigger. My mum confirmed the story. The monster juice that my mum would spray around my room to keep monsters out? That was actually just water with a large amount of my dad's cologne sprayed into it. I used to just spew out random numbers to my mum, telling to add, subtract, and multiply, and she'd in turn tell me what the final number would be. It blew my mind, and she was the damn smartest person on the planet. Then I got clever. One day I got a calculator out to make sure she had it right. She did not. I do have to wonder at what point these fun little mistruths cross over into damaging stuff for us when we're kids. I honestly think it's so hard to know where to draw the line, and even varies from child to child as well. Parenting is a minefield. My mum used to turn the clocks forward when I had sleepovers at her house. She'd run in to change the clock from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. while we were distracted. This was before we had cell phones, you see. We'd be amazed at how fast time had gone. We'd stay up really late, in quotes, and then fall asleep confident in our coolness. And she actually got to go to sleep at a decent hour without making us all shut up 6 times in the middle of the night. Now that I'm older and value my sleep, I think she's a frickin' genius. When I was in kindergarten, all of my friends would go to Disney World and talk about all of the rides they went on. I was really jealous because I'd never been. My parents didn't want to pay for a plane ride from Massachusetts to Florida. Every day I'd cry and cry just begging to go. One day in the middle of the week, they just gave in and said, "Okay, we would go." I was psyched. We went on the horse that goes back and forth and we got necklaces. We also saw a lot of couches and chairs and other furniture. The next day in class, I told all of my friends that I went to Disney World yesterday. They were amazed that I only went in one day. Turns out we'd actually gone to Jordan's Furniture, and my parents told me it was Disney World. In short, my parents tricked me into thinking that Jordan's Furniture was Disney World. My realization about my parents came pretty early in my life. When I was very young, I came downstairs at 4 in the morning to witness my dad, half asleep and wearing nothing but his undies, placing presents under the Christmas tree while shoving the cookies we left out for Santa into his face. His reaction? A relative of mine tells her kid that if she behaves well at school for 5 days in a row, she can have 2 days off school. The kid has no idea that's the weekend. For a good portion of my childhood, I thought we were just eating a different brand of tomato sauce. Turns out my mum had been liquefying carrots and putting them into the sauce to get us more veggies. It took me years to know that tomato sauce should not be orange. My husband's mother would always put 1% milk in the 2% jug simply because his brother swore that he didn't like 1%. The brother never knew the difference. "Mom, why did the milk expire 2 years ago?" This happened to a family we knew. The mum spent months slowly switching the rest of the family from whole milk to skim milk. She kept the same jug and would mix up increasing portions of skim. Finally, one day the daughter noticed the year-old expiration date, gagged and spat milk all over the kitchen, screaming that the mum was trying to kill them all. On my 21st birthday, my parents took myself and my housemates out for an early dinner, so as not to interfere with the festivities we'd planned later on. At that dinner, my dad flipped my world upside down. When I was 10 and my brother was 7, we'd taken a family trip to the Liberty Science Center, which, for those of you not in the New Jersey area, is essentially a neat multi-story playhouse full of science-related activities designed for kids. They have an IMAX theater attached that plays interesting documentaries. For a while, they had a touch tunnel where you could crawl through an extended area in complete darkness, and several demonstrations on different floors with everything from insects to the classic shattering a banana frozen with liquid nitrogen routine. To my parents' credit, they had me interested in science from a very young age, so this was a real treat for my brother and I. However, since we were still 10 and 7, we couldn't stand to be stuck in a car for more than an hour without bickering with each other. After fighting almost the entire way there, my dad laid down the law. "If I hear one more word out of either of you, I'm turning the car around." A deafening silence reigned over the rest of the car ride until we were literally pulling into the parking lot when one of us, I can't remember who, said something snarky, and my dad, true to his word, turned that car around and we drove all the way home. Fast forward to this 21st birthday at dinner, the story happened to be brought up, as I tend to use it as an example of how, while my dad was really cool, he was not one to F with. My dad then revealed a life-changing secret that only he and my mother had known. They'd never intended to actually drive all the way home after the long ride. They just wanted us to get the message. However, my dad misinterpreted some of the traffic signs and ended up back on the Garden State Parkway, which has few and far between opportunities to turn around, so he just took us home. The entire thing was an accident, but they played that off as intentional for the sake of their parental authority. They did take us back the following weekend because you bet your butt we were the most behaved children on the planet for the next few days. In short, I thought my dad was a stalwart authority figure who meant every word he said, but in reality, he's just really bad at reading street signs. When I was a kid, we had a pet bird, Bart the bird, and he could talk. For years, I recalled with great fondness talking to Bart, and Bart answering back. Well, not too long ago, I asked my dad what type of bird Bart was. Surely he was some form of parrot, and I just never put it together because I'd been so young. My dad then broke the news that Bart had never talked, that he'd stand not far off in the other room or a few steps behind me and talk for the bird. I don't think I've ever felt the carpet be pulled so quickly from under my feet. You don't know how many people I've told about Bart the talking bird. Every time we went to the hairdresser, they'd mess it up. At the time, I really preferred long hair, and they'd always cut it way too short and in styles I didn't like. Eventually, I decided that all professional hairdressers were huge screw-ups who didn't listen, and I was going to take matters into my own hands. I've been cutting my own hair since I was 15. I'm 23 now and actually pretty damn good at it. Just a few months ago, I was over at their place for dinner, and my mum casually mentions that she'd always told the hairdressers to ignore what I said and cut it in a certain way. I was floored. I'd lost faith in the entire industry. I'd had crappy hair for years and years between their crappy cuts and mine before I knew what I was doing. That stuff probably changed the course of my life in some way. As a kid, my best friend used to go on and on about how he couldn't eat the generic cereals. He had to have the name brand. How he could just taste the lower quality. Well, one night we were having a sleepover. I woke up pretty early in the morning and went upstairs to use the bathroom. In the kitchen was his mum filling the Fruit Loops from a bag of the generic stuff. She saw me, smiled, and said, "Shh." I never told my friend. That's awesome, and that mum is being economical and saving herself a great deal of needless whining. However, given the smarty little crap-eating brat that I was, you can bet that I would have been rubbing my friend's face in it starting immediately. As a kid, you were a better guy than I was. When I was like 3 or 4, I got a toy telephone car that lit up and said things when you pressed the numbers for my birthday. I played with it all day, and I didn't even question the fact that my mum didn't let me take it out of the box. 3 days later, I couldn't find it anywhere, and when I asked my mum, she told me that she'd had to return it to the store because it was infested with ants. Being a kid, I didn't think much of it, and just went back to watching Sesame Street or whatever. A few years ago, I told my mum that I still remembered that story, and she told me what had really happened. My family had just come over to the States from Nepal, and we barely had any money. My dad was getting a degree at the university, working a job and paying for our bills and his tuition at the same time. So it turns out my parents couldn't actually afford any presents for my birthday, but they wanted me to at least have something to play with, even for a little while. They bought me that toy so I'd be happy, and then had to return it a few days later. Apparently my mum left the room and cried for a solid hour after I'd asked her what happened to it when I was a kid. I had to hold back my own tears when they told me. In short, I frickin' love my parents. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was about 5 years old, my aunt and uncle got full custody of me because my mother chose her horrible boyfriend over me. Over the next few years, I'd visit her on some weekends to see my siblings. As time went on, I saw less and less of her, until one day she just stopped coming over, stopped calling, and disappeared. No big surprise because she was a shady human being anyway. One day, during a rare moment of seeing her, she basically asked why I wasn't happy to see her. I went the F off about how she was a crappy mother for not only giving me away, but also completely abandoning me. My aunt did step in and say, well, she stopped calling and visiting because we told her to. Finding that out didn't fix anything between my mother and I, but until I was much older and realized my aunt and uncle did the best thing they could for me, I felt pretty betrayed. Wasn't really a bomb my mum dropped on me, but a bomb I unwittingly opened. I was trying to get a job at several places when I was 16. I was pretty tech-savvy at the time and genuinely thought I could get a job working a help desk for a power company, a bank, and a few other places. I started to check the mail every day to see if I'd gotten a letter, since I wasn't sure they'd send me a letter, email, or call. I got a few letters from the places I'd applied to, and I was excited to open them. They were bills of significant debt, all defaulted on. My mum had said she'd pay them back and close it. I believed her, so I dropped it. I didn't know how credit worked back then, and I didn't know what extremes my mother would go to. A few years later, several years after graduating and entering the workforce, I tried to get credit on my own and got flat denied by everyone. I got letters from collectors representing the companies that my mum had opened accounts with under my name. They said the bills were never paid on. I claimed identity theft and managed to get the responsibility shifted off myself and onto my mum after filing a police report and talking to several companies over the phones across the span of several months. All of them said that she'd opened the account in my name by claiming she was my wife. In short, my mum stole my identity as a kid and claimed she was my wife. I learned to hate Mother's Day. My favorite toys would go missing. Turns out they destroyed them because they made too much noise. My stepdad claimed he never had the right size batteries for my toys. Yeah, it's because your mom used them all up. My dad used to call me into the bathroom to look at his number 2. I was always shocked out of my mind. It looked like little stars and perfect circles and even dog bones. I couldn't figure out why my doo-doo always looked stupid. Turns out he was throwing dog food into the toilet and waiting for it to bloat up before calling me in. I'm glad to say I've inherited my dad's sense of humor. My mum told me she could see through walls. She always knew when I was playing and not trying to go to bed, so I believed her for years. Turns out my nightlight cast a very bright shadow on the wall, and she would use that to see if I was in bed or not. My parents would set the clock 2 hours ahead on New Year's Eve and then take my siblings and I out for dinner so we wouldn't notice, and then wind up going to bed at 10 instead of midnight. I recently found out at age 20 that the zebra my aunt purchased for her farm when I was a kid did not in fact die from being unable to handle the environment of upstate New York, rather it was trampled to death by her llamas. Don't mess with llamas. To clarify a couple of things, the original story wasn't that the zebra froze to death in a winter storm, but that it was chronically ill from the wet and cold weather and eventually succumbed to his illness. Also, I have no idea how she acquired said zebra. She had an ostrich too, and that thing was mean as hell. My mum used to hold me up to the arcade machines and let me believe that I was playing, even though it was just the demo and title sequence. I remember getting really frustrated that I'd die at the same part every single time. For years and years, my dad, a single parent, would make grilled cheese for me by toasting bread and putting cheese on it. It was cool. Years later, I discovered at one point, while my grandma was visiting, she attempted to make me a grilled cheese the normal way. Pan, butter, deliciousness. But my dad stopped her, saying, "No, then he'll know that that exists." Also, I was invited to Neverland Ranch as a kid, but my dad didn't let me go, nor did he even tell me I was invited. Lastly, I was in Cub Scouts, but only participated in local meetings, wondering why we never did campouts or anything. I just thought it was something our troop didn't do. Recently found out that there were campouts. My dad just thought they were all buttholes, so he didn't let me go. Or tell me that they existed. My childhood was unique. My first pet was a dog I named Sparky. I had him for about 2 weeks, then one day I came back from school with my dad telling me he'd run away. I looked for that dog and set up missing posters for weeks. Turns out they gave him back to the pound they adopted him from because we couldn't afford to keep him. I remember when I was a little girl, all I wanted was to see the movie Matilda. My parents wanted to just see the Nutty Professor. So they took us to see the Nutty Professor and told me that it was Matilda. I just kept waiting and waiting. It wasn't until the end of the movie that I realized my parents were jerks. I don't know who would want to go and see that solid C of an Eddie Murphy film over the pretty solid hit that Matilda was. But regardless, I think this deception probably crosses that line we talked about earlier, from white lie to just harming your child's trust. My mum, a few times when my brothers and I were young, would turn all the lights off in the house. She'd tell us to go get our sleeping bags and bring them into the living room while she put a couple of tents together. She'd then get candles and put them in a small pile and call it a fire. This little maneuver was called camping inside. We weren't allowed to watch TV or play any video games because we were camping. She read us Goosebumps stories and we played flashlight tag. It was always fun. Cut to when I was first starting out in the world, I was having financial trouble and was consoling my mother for comfort. She told me that she's been down that road and you always pull through. I asked her to explain. She said that when we were younger, sometimes she couldn't afford to pay the power bill, and that when it was apparent that it would be shut off, then she knew it was time to go indoor camping. She did that so that none of us would ever worry or think that we wouldn't be okay. That story made me smile. I love my mum. When I was 4 years old, we didn't have a car. My mum would pick me up from daycare and then we'd walk home. Whenever I said that I was too tired to walk anymore, my mum would say, "Okay, I'll give you some energy." She'd hold my hand and make a bzzz noise as if sending me energy. Then she'd ask me if I'd had enough now. I'd say yes and would keep walking. I love my mum. When I was a kid, my favorite cereal was Cap'n Crunch's Crunch Berries. If given the opportunity, I'd eat nothing else. So for years, my mother had me believing they were only available during Christmas. So about 6 years ago, I was in a store with my ex and I see them. I explained how much I loved them as a child and we should get some. Then I realized it was July. I got really excited and even regressed a little, I think. It was then gently explained to me that I'd been duped. I'm eating Captain Crunch Berries right the frick now though, so all's well that ends well, I suppose. I used to hate whole wheat bread. My parents convinced me that it was just part-toasted white bread so that I'd eat it. When I was a teenager, my grandma, who was suffering from stage 4 throat cancer, decided that she wanted to air out her secrets before she died. She filled me in that my childhood cat Charlie didn't die from old age like they'd told me, but her and my parents had put him down while I was at school one day. I was distraught. Looking back though, I can understand why they did it. Oh, and she also told me that Dad was married before my mum and I have a much older half-brother. It's been a deep, dark family secret forever. My parents still don't know I know. Maybe I should have been more upset about that than the cat. 15-year-olds are frickin' lame. I'm sorry to all those 15-year-olds out there. You'll see. My mum bought me Mega Blocks and put them into an old Lego container once. Bullcrap. What a monster. I used to have a cat when I was about 3 named Sia, and I loved her. She was a Siamese-looking cat, and I had her like 2 years. When I was 5, she got really sick while I was at school, and my parents took her to the vet. After about 2 weeks of asking my parents how Sia was, she finally came home. Now, Sia's going to be a bit pale because she's sick, and she might act a bit funny. Being in the hospital is scary. That's what my parents told me. So Sia came home, and she was a lot paler than I remember, almost greyish-white. She also climbed behind the sofa, refused to come out, and hissed at anyone who went near her. She eventually calmed down, but didn't sleep in my room as per usual. She slept on the rafters in the basement instead. Turns out, I found this out about 6 months ago, my dad started up the lawnmower and Sia was somehow inside the lawnmower near the blade and, well, bad kitty times happened really quickly. They replaced Sia with one they found at the shelter, and the little moron that was me didn't notice. Oh, the ice cream truck just plays music when they're out of ice cream for the day. Don't bother going outside, sweetie. My dad once told me that fried calamari was just fried chicken to get me to eat it, assuming that I'd like it. And he could tell me afterwards, you ate squid and you liked it. Joke was on him though, it turns out I'm deathly allergic to squid. I'm also severely allergic to fish, shellfish, seaweed, and most mollusks. Basically, if it swims, it kills me, with the obvious exception of swimming mammals, though most of them are also deadly.
People who have accidentally caused the death of another person. What happened? When I was around 4, I was inappropriately touched by my cousin who was babysitting me. I told on her, and she took her own life. I posted this before in more detail, but the truncated version is when I was 16 years old, I hit an 87-year-old man after he ran a stop sign. I was with him holding his hand when he died on the sidewalk. He had a heart attack. They weren't able to determine if he had the heart attack before the accident, which would explain why he blew through the stop sign, or if he had one as a result. His family was very gracious, and I am very grateful for them. His son called me the day after it happened, and told me his mom had died 6 months prior. His dad had been very depressed, and while they were sad he died this way, they were happy to think their parents were reunited. I was dating this girl that was a little dysfunctional due to having been a victim of CSA by her grandpa and nobody knew about it. I noticed some red flags and got her to open up and tell me about it. After we broke up, I told her mom she should stop inviting grandpa over to Thanksgiving dinners due to the SA. The mom called me a liar, but after asking the other daughters and cousins about it, they confirmed it was true and that they had all been inappropriately touched too. After word got back to grandma, she said, "I'll take care of it." Fast forward a week and grandpa is dead. Apparently grandpa had a lot of serious medications he was taking and grandma messed with the dosage which killed him. His death was ruled natural cause and nothing ever happened to grandma. It was my mother-in-law's birthday and her daughter and son-in-law had dinner for the event at their place. My wife, 3 kids, and I drove out after work. As we pulled up to their cul-de-sac home in the dark, I saw something odd in the grass between the sidewalk and street near their mailbox. When I got out, an old man, about 80 years old, called over to me asking if I wouldn't mind helping him up. Said he had been out for a walk, stumbled, and been in that spot for about 45 minutes. My wife and daughters went inside the house. My then 12-year-old son stayed with me while I helped the man up. Wonderful guy, started saying this was the icing on the cake for his day, as he had fallen asleep early afternoon on his couch with a lit cigarette, which caught the couch on fire. Fire department came, put the fire out with little damage, and moved the couch to the curb when they were done. By this time, my brother-in-law had come outside with us. We walked the man back to his house about 5 doors down. During our trip there, he regaled us with stories of him in the Navy during the war, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember which war he had said. He made special not to talk to my son about how wonderful it was that he was helping. Introduced himself to us as Bill, said he was the last unpaid bill. Thought that was pretty clever. As we made to leave, he asked if we would bring his couch from the curb back up to the house for him. Not sure why he wanted it, didn't ask. So my brother-in-law and I moved the couch and set it next to the house outside of his garage. We wished Bill well, then headed back to the house for dinner. When I got in, I noticed that my shirt smelled of burnt plastic. Brother-in-law gave me a sweatshirt to change into, and we had a great birthday celebration before I and the family left about 2 hours later for home. Around 2:30 the next morning, our phone rang. My wife answered, and I pretended to be more asleep than I actually was so I didn't have to deal with a bad phone call in the wee early hours. They're very seldom about good things. It was the police department from the town my brother-in-law and sister-in-law lived in. They asked me questions about my activities the previous evening while I was at their house. The couch reignited and burned Bill's house down, killing him in the process. The police grilled my brother-in-law, examined his arms, then called me. I don't think I slept well for over a month afterwards and couldn't get the tragedy out of my head for a long time. I should have known from the smell on my clothes that it wasn't safe to move that couch. I should have put the pieces together, but I was just too interested in getting back to my family to celebrate. Nothing more ever came of it, but I'll never get rid of the knowledge that if I hadn't committed to one simple action that I performed, then another human being would not have died. I was relieved when my sister-in-law and brother-in-law moved a couple of years later because I hated seeing that empty lot every time I went to their house. This was maybe 11 years ago, but to this day, about once a year around my mother-in-law's birthday, my brother-in-law and I still have a toast to the last unpaid bill. Turned left into my sister's driveway at 3 a.m. A guy on a Harley was doing 60 miles per hour in a 30 with no headlight. My half-ton pickup left 4 feet of skid marks from being pushed back by the force. I still remember seeing him do mid-air somersaults. This was 1976. Dang, that guy was fully responsible for his own death. You just happened to be there. Lucky he didn't take you with him. It's a shame, but double the speed limit in the middle of the night with no lights? 100% his fault. War survivor from Chechnya 94 to 96 war. I told a girl, maybe 17 years old, to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and said, "Run out, the roof is gonna fall," and she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill, trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope at least. I was supposed to meet a friend ahead to soccer practice, but he wasn't there when I got to where we were supposed to meet. I got impatient and decided to head to practice myself. He never got there, so I assumed he was sick or something. 2 days later, my mom told me he got hit by a car and died after running out in the street to get a ball he was kicking while waiting for me. The timing of things seems like if I had waited just a minute longer, he wouldn't have had to wait for me and would have lived. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the streetlights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between two crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him lying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse while I was on the phone with 911, but couldn't feel anything because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what happened. They put him up on a stretcher with this strange device that I later found out was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up and I finally saw my car with the flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine who's the editor at a local paper that the police were still considering charges. Also how I found out that he died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their own investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked third shift. He told me that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling the worst was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going back to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while just so I don't forget what he looked like. I'm at least partially responsible for 3 deaths. So I'm a weather forecaster. A few years ago, I was forecasting for Afghanistan. Now, we were doing these forecasts from a base in the States, which means we had to coordinate our forecast with someone who was deployed to Afghanistan. Sometimes the downrange forecaster was really experienced, other times they weren't. It was a mixed bag. Anyway, I had been forecasting for at least 2 years before this incident. I was familiar with it, and I was actually in a supervisory capacity, simply overseeing all of the forecasts going out in my zone. Well, one day, I was talking with one of my forecasters about the potential for large hail and how I'd like him to put that in his forecast. Now that's a big thing to put in a forecast because of how operationally significant this is. Aircraft must be put in hangars, missions are canceled, assets must be protected, etc. So when it came time to discuss this with the downrange forecaster, he was absolutely against it. He didn't want to brief that to the commander because again, missions have to be canceled based on what you think will happen. If you're wrong, you've set back a lot of people and wasted a lot of time. So the deployed forecaster tries to argue against it, but his reasoning really just boiled down to, I don't want to brief that. So when I wasn't looking, he essentially just pulled rank on my junior forecaster and forced him to take it out of the forecast. And so we went out to the base with no hail in it, only hinting at some vicinity thunderstorms. Well, when I noticed, I was furious, but I said screw it, we'll let him be wrong. This was the first time I'd ever wanted to put large hail in a forecast. Maybe we were over-forecasting it. Nope. Basically, right on schedule, a huge thunderstorm popped up and dumped large hail on the base. It did a few million in damage to aircraft, injured a helipilot who was pre-flighting his bird, and killed 3 Afghan National Army soldiers who had left on a patrol and couldn't find any cover. They wound up beaten to death by hail. That has always bugged me. They didn't need to die. We knew the potential was there, and I basically just let an incorrect forecast go out that got them killed. 3 lanes wide on my side of the street. I am in the lane closest to the middle of the street. I just get through an intersection and see a car attempting to turn in front of me into a gas station. This gas station entrance is close enough to the intersection I just went through that there is no middle section for them to wait in to turn when it is clear. They inch into my lane across a double yellow line and stop. I quickly get over to my right, one lane. They inch over into the next lane and stop again. I start to panic. Why are they stopping? What is he doing? I quickly see I can get in the far right lane and move over. This older man driving, I think he panicked. He tries to gas it past me into the gas station. I'm in a Dodge Dakota and they're in an old Chevy truck with rack seating. I slow down as much as I can, but there is no time. I T-bone them, and my car basically slams them into a concrete pole. I stop a couple of feet from a concrete wall myself. I get out of the car with my adrenaline on full. I'm not even sure if I'm hurt or not. I can't feel anything anyway. I stumble over to their car to see if they're okay. The looks I received from this old man and his wife still haunt me to this day. They looked at me like I was the Grim Reaper coming to claim them. Absolute horror. Blood coming down their face, wondering why I did this to them as smoke from the front of their car looms over them like creeping death. The woman died later that day from her injuries at the local hospital. The man later tried to sue me, but I was cleared of any legal wrongdoing based on the investigation that had taken place. They had concluded that I had done everything I could have done to avoid a collision. It was just unfortunate timing that this older gentleman made an illegal driving decision. A decision I am sure he regretted until the end of his days. I'm still messed up from this even though it was years and years ago. Getting cleared legally does nothing for one's own conscience and psyche. My vehicle, whether it was intentional or not, was used as an instrument of destruction that ended up killing a man's wife. I have PTSD flashbacks. If I drive by a similar looking area that looks similar to the accident site, I still get such crippling anxiety that I have to disassociate in order to not lose control. I have severe depression, and I don't know how I function and survive, to be perfectly honest. I've run the gamut of emotions over this incident. I have lost friends, relationships, and isolated from my family. Why? I don't feel I deserve what was taken away from others. I'm slowly killing myself daily over it because I can't find any meaning in it. That's because there is no meaning. It was an accident and I don't know how to accept it and move on. I've done different types of therapy. I've taken medication. I've talked to many people about it and nothing has changed. The reason I write all of this is to please implore all of you to be safe when you are behind the wheel of any motor vehicle. I did everything I could to be careful and something horrible still happened. I can't even imagine being the same level of reckless I have seen other drivers who end up getting away with it with absolutely no consequences. I hope with every ounce of my being that no one ever experiences the type of pain and suffering that has become my everyday life and reality. I wouldn't wish this pain, guilt, or suffering upon my worst enemy. I used to work a strange overnight schedule, 10-hour shifts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I try and keep awake the same hours on my days off, especially on Thursdays. This was a pretty rural area, so there wasn't much open at those hours except a gas station that had a tiny cafe area. I didn't want to keep people in the house awake, so I spent a lot of time at the gas station. I'd usually read or talk with the cashier on duty. I think she felt a little safer having someone else there too. One night, a man comes in with a little boy and asks if they can use the bathroom. It's something like 3 a.m. The kid looks sick or uncomfortable. To me, it looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. After they're in the bathroom, the cashier and I look at each other. She thinks there's something off about this too. I went outside to get a description of the vehicle. After they leave, we call the police. The local police passed it along to the county sheriff's department and a local officer came to the gas station. He asked us a couple more questions and we listened to his radio to hear what was happening. A county officer spots the truck and pulls it over. After the officer gets out of the car, the truck backs into it and takes off. The police pursue him. We didn't get a lot of details after that. He crashed or abandoned the truck. The truck was on fire and loose rounds of ammunition were going off in the truck. I believe the boy was somewhere safe because I didn't hear any more about him. The guy tried to swim across a small but deceptively treacherous river and he drowned. That was close to 20 years ago. If I remember correctly, he was the boy's dad but did not have custody. He was recently released from prison and the truck was stolen. At the time of the story, the man had been recently released from prison prior to stealing the truck and drowning. My wife and I were both very sick with the flu. My father watched our 2 small children and even came to sit with me in the hospital. The day after I got out of the hospital, he got the flu and died a couple days later. I still feel guilty knowing that he didn't have to sit with my children or that he didn't have to sit by my bedside, but he did. It helps knowing that he loved me so much that he was willing to put his life at risk to be with me. I just never imagined that the flu could have been so serious to be hospitalized, much less kill someone. I hold myself responsible and I feel guilty for getting him sick. When I was 18, I was working the night shift in a nursing home as an aide. Part of my job was to turn the paralyzed patients every 2 hours to make sure they didn't get bed sores. This one particular resident had late-stage Parkinson's disease, and her muscles and joints were stiff and brittle and she was catatonic. As I was flipping her from one side to another, I applied light pressure to her leg to move her back a bit and this snapped her femur. Given her age and health, the doctors decided that surgery was dangerous and she would have to heal on its own, if at all. Because of this, we can no longer flip her, which resulted in bed sores. She eventually went septic from those bed sores and died of septic shock. I always felt so bad about that. I haven't told many of my friends this story, but sharing it has helped wrap my head around what happened. It was about 3 a.m. on a Thursday last December. I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time. I was heading back from a party at my friend's house, pretty bleary-eyed. I had slept for a few hours and then got in my car. I was running out of gas, so I stopped at a gas station right off of I-95 before heading north to home. A guy walks up to me while I'm pumping gas and he asks for directions. He was older and a bit drunk. He came off as a yachty, and yachties aren't really common in that part of town. I had a bunch of yachty friends, so he didn't sketch me out, but I immediately kind of wrote him off. I told him to take I-95 north. He stumbles off and gets on his Vespa. Scooters are super common in South Florida, and then drives away. I go inside, get a drink, and then sit in my car for a few minutes, waking up before going. I hit the highway and I'm cruising north when I see a ton of emergency lights coming down the southbound side. I remember thinking, oh no, something's going down. I started paying closer attention to the road in front of me, and there were lights in my rear view too, coming up really freaking gassed. What happened next was kind of a blur and is not work safe. There were recognizable body parts in the road. Part of an arm, an upper torso with the head attached, blood everywhere, bits and pieces of plastic and metal in the road, and lumps of flesh or organ or something. I didn't see any of it until I was extremely close, but the image is something that has really messed me up. I called my mom. She said I was incoherent and screaming about blood. Florida Highway Patrol checked my car, which had blood on it but no damage, the next day, and the officer explained to me an older white male on a scooter had gotten on I-95 north. He merged inappropriately and was hit by a dump truck, and his corpse was hit by several other vehicles, including mine. They closed I-95 for the entire morning, well past rush hour. The news article said that remains and debris were strewn across an area the size of a football field. I sold my car and moved. The first 2 months were very rough, but I'm feeling better now, despite shaking at the moment. TLDR, I told a stranger to take the highway. He did so on a scooter. I drove through the aftermath of my advice. 7-ish a.m. on a Sunday morning. I'm heading to work in a small town at the age of 15 or 16. Come over a crest on a hill and have no time to react. T-bone someone making an illegal U-turn in a driveway. All I remember is veering off to the right and damaging someone's stone wall after the hit, crawling out of the wreckage out of breath and stumbling to see if the other person was okay. Their vehicle spun multiple times and landed in a ditch facing away, but driver's side visible from where I originally was. Driver wasn't there. Move along the vehicle and check the other side. Driver is hanging out of the passenger side window with a steady stream of blood from their skull. Bottom line for me is that I ask and implore everyone, please use your seatbelt. My mom is Thai and my dad is American, so I spend most of the year in the US and summers in Thailand. When I was 8, my family and my cousin's family were at the beach in Cha-am. My cousin's son, James, and I had been playing in the ocean for hours by this time, and we were both exhausted. Since we began playing, the water got much more violent with large waves as a thunderstorm was starting. As soon as my parents heard lightning, they yelled for us to come back to the shore, and I just started swimming back without checking to see if James was following. When I walked up onto the sand, I looked back and I couldn't see him. We were much farther out than 2 8-year-olds should have been, and James was too tired to keep himself above the water. I'm not sure what I could have done once I realized I couldn't find him, but I can't stop thinking about it. And when I go back to the condo there, I can't bring myself to get back into the ocean. Everyone responding has been incredibly supportive, and it means the world. I know realistically I couldn't change what happened, but that can't stop me from wishing I could. Thank you again to everyone for the kind words. 2 years ago, my sister was working at a dealership. Her husband and I were spending the day together until it was time to pick up sis from work. So when it came time to get his gal, I took the keys and said I'm driving. He was mad enough that he refused to go with me. When I came back with my sister, he was nowhere to be found, but it was common for him to go on walks to calm himself down, so we didn't think much of it. 8 a.m. the next morning, state police were banging on the door. They told us he was struck and killed by a train while he was sleeping on the tracks. That's not your fault. You didn't let somebody too drunk drive. That's what you're supposed to do. Was skiing with a friend when I was still living in Colorado. We were going a good speed and enjoying the mountain. When we came back onto the main trail, he was still going really fast. I yelled at him to slow down, and an elderly lady ended up merging at the same time as he looked back at me. My buddy is a good-sized guy and ended up colliding with this old woman. The ski patrol ended up grabbing her from the mountain, and she was clearly in a lot of pain. She ended up dying from her injuries a few days later. After her investigation, my buddy and the woman were both in the wrong. He had to pay some fines, but never got any sort of lawsuit.
Office workers. What's your best office story? Used to work with a fairly large woman. Every winter, she would catch a cold and hack and cough and just have a rough go of it. She would have these horrible coughing fits to the point where we thought she might pass out. One day, she had a horrible coughing fit and peed herself. That night, the carpet cleaners came in, pushed all of the office chairs into a back room, and shampooed the rugs. Everyone came in the next day to find their chairs in a room, and no one knew which chair was which. Everyone spent the day standing or sniffing their chair to see if they had the pee chair. The big lady was actually pretty dang nice, and she went on to lose a bunch of weight, ditch her loser husband, and have a great life. So there's a happy ending there. Came into work, I was the early manager, and before I get to my desk, my phone is ringing. Answer it, and it's an employee. All he says is, "I have to go. I'm bleeding from my butt." Stunned, I say, yeah, you should leave. I walk to his cube and find a blood-soaked chair with bloody napkins all over it. I ask if he wants to call 911 or something, and he says, "No, I'm driving myself." I call maintenance and I have to explain to them and upper management how all this blood appeared. Guy ended up okay and came back to work a couple of days later. Never asked what the heck the issue was. That's a bleeding hemorrhoid. Not that you really probably wanted to know. The chair was soaked. It was a lot of blood. I asked if everything was good after the fact, and he said it was, and nothing to worry about for other people. I speak from experience. Not quite that bad, but it lasted for days and bled clear through my pants and left a large stain on my seat at its worst. Went to the ER. The doctor acted like I was a big wimp and wasting his time. He then forces a golf ball-sized blood clot out of my butt. So pretty much not a big deal and nothing a person would ever want to discuss with another living soul. I work in a public library, which combines all the joy of customer service and office work. Usually it's just people calling to get phone numbers verified, but there's a few who call for life advice, including, "How many calories are in rye bread versus whole bread? Do I need to water my cactus today? I updated Firefox and now I don't like it. How do I go back to the old version? What day this weekend will traffic be bad?" Personal all-time favorite caller goes to the woman who called to ask me what fellatio technique geishas performed. I guess there is a tendency to automatically think that librarians must read a lot and therefore know more. As far as I know, that particular job is about storage and data entry, but this sure is a funny assumption. I work at a factory back office, watching over incoming and outgoing materials, and general material management. We had a shipping container come in from the States, transporting several big bags of sugar and milk powder mixture. We crack open the container, and much to our surprise, we find a cat. Bear in mind, this container spent a solid week or two at sea. The cat was alive. Apparently, it survived by eating the powder. So I did the old screenshot the desktop, hide desktop icons, and save the screenshot as the new desktop background. To 3 different computers, 2 of which were shared between 5 to 10 people. Now the problem was, I called in sick with food poisoning the next day. Utter chaos broke out. No one could open any programs. IT had to get involved, and it apparently took them a few hours to figure out what had happened. No one ever knew it was me, and I had planned on, taking the credit and winning that stage of the prank war. But no, I played dumb and bit my tongue. My current office building was once a funeral home that had sat vacant for a number of years after the previous owner shot himself in the apartment upstairs. When we first moved into the office, there was a wall panel that was accidentally knocked out in the basement. There were about 30 people worth of ashes hidden in the wall. I have one. We have an agent. Let's call him Joe. Joe is about 60 and the perfect employee. Never misses work, perfect stats, honest, customers love him and always give him praise. Volunteers for overtime and absolutely everybody loves him. I use his calls as examples in my training class. He's been offered numerous management positions, but he's perfectly content sitting at home, fixing customers' problems, making them happy, and making our company money. He is an absolute machine. 2 years ago, his wife and his 40th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I had a business trip to Ohio for a new system training. Joe was told that he had to come with me to learn. He pleaded that he couldn't because he would miss his wedding anniversary. Plus it was odd because agents never go on trips, and my manager said sternly, "Do it, Joe. You don't have a choice." Joe of course went home and packed up and got ready to leave a few days later. His wife said she was going to stay with her sisters while he was gone and left the night before. Our company car picked me up from the airport and we headed to Joe's. He was pretty upset and depressed but tried to be upbeat. We went to dinner and stalled for a few hours, for good reason, and when we got to the airport we boarded our plane and headed to Houston for a switch. We got to Houston and we walked up to the Miami gate and I said, "There's your plane." He looked up and I pointed over to his wife standing at the gate. My boss had arranged to send them to Miami for a week and then on a cruise to Jamaica for their anniversary with my boss's company credit card for expenses. The first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh my God, I didn't pack for that." But of course we had his wife take care of that when we sent her out on an earlier flight. He started crying right there in the airport and hugged me. I handed him the credit card and went over to his wife, gave her a hug and told her she owed me some apple cookies. So bomb. And headed to my plane for Ohio. Went to Ohio and, yeah, Ohio. We had a Phil Collins day to screw with a co-worker who professed to hating Genesis. Months after revealing their hatred, the president of the company had the IT company stay after everyone left to absolutely cover this person in Phil Collins's face, and I heart Phil signs in celebration of Phil Collins's birthday. It was practically a holiday and very little work was accomplished as a result. Pretty much the best day at the office ever. I love this because of everyone getting involved and because of my not-so-secret appreciation for Phil Collins. Sounds like a fun place to work. Will this be an annual event? I think my favorite part of this is the casual disregard for the IT department and the rest of the office, making them their own prank monkeys. A guy at my office had a fishing rod along the ceiling. He had the hook positioned over a man's head. We'll call the man Dave. Every so often, he dropped the hook, which has a little weight, onto Dave's head and then quickly pulled the cord so the hook is back up to the ceiling and isn't visible. This is going on months, and the guy who was being pranked didn't have a clue. He went to the doctor for tests because it felt like a throb to his head, so he worried something was really wrong. When we told him what was happening, he couldn't stop laughing at himself. Dave's revenge was pretty sweet. He did the deed with the prankster's sister. "Oh, I really thought there was something wrong with me. I guess you learn something new about yourself every day. You got me, guys. I'm going to penetrate your sister." OP thought the question said, "Best orifice story." I got this job a few years back. In the first week, I was blown away at the technical ineptitude of the whole darn place. Our job requires a lot of scanning, usually large stacks of bank statements, 100 to 200 pages at a time. And the people who I worked with and for, more often than not, needed to scan things that were front to back. How they did this blows my mind to this day. Step 1. Flip the whole stack upside down so the reverse side was ready to scan. Step 2. Make a copy of every back side. Step 3. Take the reverse side and place it just behind its front side so that it would be page 1, copy of page 2, page 3, copy of page 4, etc. Step 4. Scan the whole stack face up. The amount of paper they wasted was unbelievable. That's the day I became a genius by showing them our enterprise-level scanner could scan front and back simultaneously with the push of 2 buttons. This is also when I became partly responsible for every IT issue in the office, despite having IT members on staff at all times. 10 minutes into the company meeting, someone's phone went off playing bagpipe music. But as it got louder, we realized it was an actual set of bagpipes playing outside. Before we knew it, the guy marches into the conference room, blasting away that one Scottish song. I don't know what it's called, but you know the one I mean. After he finished playing, the speaker, who had been playing dumb until now, announced that we had just acquired a small company in Scotland. Best announcement ever. I worked with a guy we called Irish Jeff. We were on the sales team, and he will call customers and start singing "Oh Danny Boy" until the phone rings. When the customer answers and asks if he was singing, he will say, "Well, I am Irish." He will then talk to them for 45 minutes about his Irish heritage and the names of the boats that originally brought people over from Ireland, without letting them off the phone. He doesn't really ever talk about anything he's supposed to be selling. He was born and raised in Texas. We call them plastic patties in Ireland. They annoy us as much as they annoy you. This was at my last job, a call center on National Donut Day at Krispy Kreme. Girl A had gotten a box of donuts and was on a call with a customer. Girl B comes up and takes one out of the box. Girl A mutes her phone and says, "B-word, you had better be joking. Don't touch my donuts." Girl B turns around and walks away with the donut. Girl A hangs up on her customer and full-on assaults Girl B. An epic brawl breaks out right in the middle of the call floor, and they even crash through the giant partition that separates our call center from another company's, which is actually all in the same giant room. At some point, a knife tumbles out of one of their purses. No one actually pulled it out or tried to use it, but it did fall out. Management has everyone end their calls and clear the floors out. Cops are called and both girls are escorted out, never to be seen there again. Because donuts. I swear to God this is true. I worked in a staffing company as a recruiter. One of the sales guys always bragged about his martial arts skills. One afternoon, one of the female recruiters called bullcrap on him. They were right outside my cubicle. He says something to the effect of, "Oh, don't believe me? I will kick my foot right over your head right now. Stand here, just like this." He positions her and then he gets in a karate squat. I don't know how else to describe that pose. And goes for it without any stretching, practice, or anything. He rotates and kicks his foot way up, just high enough to make solid contact with her right temple with a solid thud. She staggers a bit dazed and he runs and hides in his cube. I couldn't believe what I just saw. It happened so quick. It was insane. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if the individual is Michael Scott for the audacity and irresponsibility or Dwight Schrute for the martial arts. Maybe some kind of freak hybrid. We call her the Runner. Call center rep was going to be fired for refunding fees that had never been charged. She was essentially just giving away money because she couldn't figure anything out. About halfway to the conference room, she figures out what's happening. As such, she comes to a dead stop and refuses to keep going. She keeps asking her manager, "Johnny, are you going to fire me?" Of course he can't confirm since he's still in the middle of the floor, so he tells her he just wants to be able to have a conversation in private. She keeps asking and he keeps not answering. Eventually, she just turns around and takes off for her desk. Johnny is standing there for about 10 minutes trying to decide between going after her or continuing to the conference room where his boss is waiting for them. He finally decides on the conference room. Johnny is a pretty large guy and his boss is a chain smoker. After the boss knows what happened, they take off running over to her desk and the other rep tells them that she left. They then sprint down into the parking lot. Just as they get to the doors, they see her car pulling onto the street. They hung out for about 5 minutes to catch their breath. When they got back, Johnny called corporate HR, and they let him know that the rep had already called Aetna to file for a leave of absence. She got fired anyway. A girl I worked with, married, was screwing the boss, also married. They stayed after hours for weeks to do their thing in his office. For some reason, she opened up to me about this, even though we weren't friends, and she included the fact that he prematurely arrives all the time. So anytime he's being a butthole, I just picture that and I feel better. This morning, I found a bloody glove in my desk drawer, and Jim Halpert tried to convince me I committed murder. I think he may be the real murderer. My coworker was out of town for an office pancake breakfast. In her absence, we decided to make her a breakfast plate. We ended up making a Vitruvian man made of sausages on a Royal Chenet plate, and hiding it in her office. She found it, and then the Vitruvian man began to travel office to office. It was sealed with tape, but that didn't stop it from starting to go moldy. The Vitruvian man was hidden in desk drawers, under paper piles, behind coats. I knew it was my turn for the Vitruvian man to end up on my office, but when I got in, I couldn't find it anywhere. Later in the day, one of our VPs came in to meet me with a serious matter. He asks me a question, and I'm thinking of my response. I look up. There on the ceiling, Mission Impossible style, is a moldy man made of sausages with its taped-on smiley face looking down at me. I awkwardly carried on the conversation with the VP through random laughter which didn't make sense to him. I had to throw out the plate after that. In total, we had it moving around the office for about a month. We've had a couple of good prank wars over the years. Best thing that comes to mind quickly is when we changed a guy's phone autocorrect to replace the full stop with a question mark. He was very confused for days. I also tied all the cables of a guy's computer together under his desk with a zap strap. Monitors, mouse, keyboard, phone, etc. I then hooked that bundle of cables to the lever under his chair that controlled the up-down position and turned the chair so that it was at its 90-degree angle. He came to his desk after lunch and sat down, grabbed a hold of his desk like he normally does to turn his chair, and spun to face his computer. The entire desk was pulled into the rear corner of his cubicle. It made a lot of noise, but not as much as he did swearing. I changed the guy's autocorrect to change the to the fricking. He could not type, so he was always looking down at his keys and depending on words to catch any mistakes. Needless to say, he turned in documentation like, "I called the fricking customer and they told me that the fricking software was not functioning correctly." Clearly, I've switched the word fricking for the actual word that this particular prankster used. Here are some more office pranks. I changed people's autocorrect to say, "I'm pooping" instead of "hey." Another one, change work to the brothel. And the best, change beer to fun butt stuff. "I'm pooping. Super busy day at the brothel today. In desperate need of fun butt stuff." I did this to my business partner's computer as a joke and went on holiday. He never proofreads anything, so when I got back, I walked into a massive crap storm. He still thinks his computer caught a virus, and if he ever finds out the truth, he will murder-suicide us both. 10 out of 10. Totally worth it. The only funny thing was the time I placed an ad in the paper saying, monkeys for sale, $50 with his number. That's a whole nother story. You'd be surprised at how many people want cheap monkeys. There are many phantom crapper stories out there where someone drops a deuce in the bathroom floor or shower. But at one of my Navy commands, we actually had someone take a crap in the coffee pot, and then run the coffee machine, fill up the pot, and leave it there for people. Luckily, someone smelled it before they tried to drink it. They never caught the guy. We had a general office questionnaire one day. Questions like, do you like your job? Do you feel listened to? Or have you been harassed at work? One person filed in yes to that last question. Massive panic within the company followed. Protocols were set up, meetings held, experts hired, and our team managers took each and every one of us separately and asked us with concern and kindness in their eyes, was it you? Did anyone hurt you? It was John. He and Fred were good friends, and always slapping each other on the butt or poking each other in the side, especially when on the phone and with a customer. He had filled in yes for a laugh because technically he was slapped on the butt. He got to explain that to the company president and was sacked shortly after. I think it's more screwed up to do an anonymous questionnaire and then ask people what they answered. Really poor ethics. Good luck to the management if they ever try to get straight answers on future surveys. They don't want straight answers, they want a paper that says everything is perfect. If doing crap like that means that people will lie next time, rather than mention any actual concerns, then that's all the better for them. Two middle-aged women, late 40s, grey hair, mom jeans, got into a fight at the office. I won't use their real names. I don't remember the context of the fight, but Deb went into Stephanie's office and closed the door, and there was a little bit of shouting and then a thud. The door flies open just in time for me to see Stephanie throwing a punch. They yell at each other in the lobby, and one of them actually says, "Let's take this outside." So they do. Some of the younger guys in the office went after them and had to break them up in the parking lot. Only one of them got fired, and they offered me her job a few days later. So I had this coworker who got a hold of the office's emergency air horn. She would sneak up behind people and blast it right in their ear. Most had a heart attack. She was really good at being sneaky with it too, and you'd be working away, have no idea, and she'd be like right under your fricking desk, and then that gosh darn air horn. Were there not huge consequences for blowing the emergency air horn to prank people? On the one hand, this is hilarious. On the other hand, I would absolutely not tolerate it in my workspace. I think the tension of not knowing where the next toot was coming from would destroy my sanity. Our office was centrally controlled by a head office in another city. There was a massive transformer explosion knocking out all the systems and controls in the head office. Essentially, no work could get done, no customers could get to us, we couldn't even cool the building down. Mid-August was 35+ degrees Celsius outside. So we had to send everyone home for about 3 days, and only essential staff stayed. I was in HR, so I was one of them. Slowly started to build up staff as we were getting closer to operation. Ended up working about 110 hours, including sleeping there. Working, however, is a very loose term. Since no PCs could run anything, we sat and watched TV, played board games and poker, played a ping pong tournament, and in our break room we had NES, SNES, and Sega. We ended up playing Super Spike Volleyball Tournament, an NES Ice Hockey Tournament, which I won, and an Excite Bike Tournament. One of the guys who had to stay on through the night played through Zelda. In conclusion, Explosion got me 70 hours of overtime while winning NES Ice Hockey Tournament with all the skinny players. Oh boy, do I have a good one. I was an intern at the time. Summer of 2013, I'm interning at a pharmaceutical/biotech company, and was meeting the team. There was this particular guy, white guy, mid-40s, on the team who I had lunch with on a daily basis. We talked about what I was studying in school at the time, and how I wanted to travel the world for a bit after graduation, instead of just going straight to a 9-to-5 office life. He got deeply depressed when I said so, and started saying he's been doing this 9-to-5 thing for 20 years. He's like 45. And what I said to him really made him wake up. I'm in my head like, oh, this isn't going to be good. Fast forward 2 days later, I'm finishing up training modules assigned to me, and all of a sudden, one of the HR ladies walks over to the manager's cube and explains that he quit. No 2 weeks notice. And my manager bolts up and yells in disbelief, "He what? Please repeat what you just said. He went to Taiwan to find himself?" I'm trying to connect the dots to see if I, the lowly intern, had really said some things to stir up an employee to quit his job and travel the world. I didn't tell my manager the conversation I'd had with him, but I did tell one of the girls that I worked with, and that's when I started my journey of an office fling. But that's a story for another day. In conclusion, I had a casual conversation as an intern with an employee about my aspirations to travel the world after I graduate. Probably made the employee quit, Don't know if it was coincidence or not, but I think the conversation stirred his actions.
Cashiers, what's been the most interesting reaction you've experienced when someone's gotten their card declined? Not necessarily a bad customer behavior story, but one that I'll share anyway. I was a cashier at a chain hardware store, the big orange one. A mom, dad, and a few kids, all in ill-fitting clothes, but pleasant as all get out, come up to the register and look like they're having a rough day. They have 3 carts full of merchandise, all basic stuff. One of everything you would need if you were moving out or starting from scratch. Toilet paper, cleaning supplies, mop, broom, light bulbs, carts full of just everything you can imagine. I ask, "You guys moving to a new place?" The mother says, "Actually, our house burned down." I apologize for their circumstances and continue to ring up their items. The total ends up over $1,000. I run their card and it's declined. At this particular department store, you're allowed to discount a total up to $50 without manager approval. So I do that and it's still declined. The parents look like they're at their complete breaking point but are taking it so gracefully for a family with 3 kids who just lost everything. The mom tears up and starts calmly making decisions about what to put back. I asked them to hang tight, pulled the manager aside and explained the situation. The manager and I walked back to the family and they are still eliminating things. And my manager took 50% of the entire transaction, then added a 10% senior discount and a 10% military discount on top of everything. The card then worked and they were incredibly grateful and nearly in tears as I bagged everything up. I'll never forget how awesome that manager was. I didn't even really have to explain anything after I said, "So their house burnt down?" And she immediately jumped into action to show some compassion. A good old story about human kindness and compassion. Well, ain't that just peachy now? I was working at a mega bookstore. A man came up with 2 or 3 serious philosophy books. Then he flicked his credit card at me. Don't do that to a cashier, just don't. I said nothing and swiped his card. It declined. The screen asked me to call Amex. I tell the customer I have to call. He hisses at me not to say it so loud. I had a phone with me, so I made the call right there standing at the register. Amex tells me to confiscate the card, if you believe you can do that. So I say, sorry, they tell me I have to take your card. He screams, "My mother is a crunt minus the R. She cut me off." I cut the card in half. I still feel good about that day. Literally cannot stand that attitude. This person sounded like they were just a little jerk, so I don't blame their mum for cutting them off. The fact of the matter is, people, your parents may have brought you into this world, but that doesn't mean they have to be responsible for you forever. I've talked about it before, but personal responsibility is just something that you have to accept eventually when it comes to living your life and being responsible for yourself and the way that you behave and treat other people. We see a fairly clever smoke and mirrors routine at my liquor store. Customer comes in, walks to the spirits hard liquor section and puts 1 bottle under their shirt while packing up a second and walking back to the register with it. They attempt to buy the second bottle with a card that they know will decline. Then they say they have to call their bank and dial a number as they leave. Misdirection works. These goddamn alcoholic criminals can learn misdirection and deception, but they can't learn the 12 steps. Cashier at a drive-thru. I took his card at the first window, told him it was declined. He says, "All right, I'll just go, I guess." He pulls up to the next window, demands his food, then slams on the gas, pulling away, almost crashing into another car. That boy wanted his Wendy's. If you are ever hungry enough to steal, get fruits and vegetables and things. I remember I was in America fairly recently in LA and I met this homeless guy. At least I assume he was homeless because he was pretty dirty and preaching the word of God. Anyway, I decided to buy this guy some food at like a bodega or something. He's picking out cereal packets and everything. I say to him, "Oi, take a banana." And he's like, "What? No, I don't want a banana." I'm like, "Take a goddamn banana. It's full of potassium. It's good for you." Like seriously, if you're gonna steal food, get something that is wholesale good for you, not goddamn Wendy's or McDonald's or something like that, I swear. I had this one lady who just kept making me rescan it over and over and over again until eventually my manager had to shoo her away. She was clearly desperate, but I worked at a store where nothing we sold was necessary for daily life. Literally nothing, so I didn't have much sympathy. Liquor store? No, we had like ugly fake plants and furniture and random decorative things. I'd be sympathetic for alcohol. That was multiple comments on the same thing, but I felt like it was necessary for the context, and yeah, I wouldn't be that sympathetic about that either. I was at a fairly uncrowded Walmart in a nice neighborhood at about 11 p.m. and my card didn't get declined, but there was something strangely wrong with it. It was the only form of payment I had. The cashier kept trying to punch in numbers and doing all sorts of computer stuff, and he needed to see my driver's license for some reason. It was taking forever, and I became overwhelmed with paranoia that it was a Jason Bourne type situation, that I swiped my card and an alert came up on the screen with a big red X and a code that meant he needed to stall as long as possible until men in suits could surround the building and I could be apprehended. I was sweating bullets and thought about running, but then it finally went through and I could take my milk and Reese's home. My man out here buying some Reese's Pieces and he thinks he's gonna get Jason Bourne. My God, buddy, I need to tell you something. It's okay, but you are not the one. Mostly it's just, oh no, that should definitely go through. Try it again. Fails. Let me check the bank. Calls and moans at the bank for a bit. Now try. Works. Now that I think about it, my card has never been definitively declined. I've had times where the tap doesn't work or it's like, you're suddenly spending a lot of money. Is this actually you doing this? Yes, it is. Okay, and then it works again. I had one lady who screamed and accused me of purposely making her card decline to embarrass her, as if a 16-year-old making minimum wage somehow could manage that or would have any reason to do that to a stranger. I don't doubt that, but teenagers can be excessively cruel. Back in the 90s, I worked for Rumblos. Had a guy pick out a new TV and VCR, wanted warranty. Nice easy sale. Trouble is, I noticed the signatures were a bit different, and in those days, anything over £100 you had to phone through for authorization. So I did, and the card was stolen. Lady at the other end of the phone said I was as much as possible supposed to hold the line and keep the customer in the store as the police had been called. So I say to the guy, sorry, it seems their system is playing up, so it's going to take a while for the authorization to come through. He seems fine with it. Waited and waited what must have been 20 minutes and another customer said, you know what, mate, you're making it look like he's stolen that card. I told him that I was just told to wait for the authorization code and that would take a while. Because their system, yada yada yada. Card bearer pegged it out of the shop. I could now explain to the Good Samaritan that the card was stolen and in the nicest way possible that he was a butt and he should keep his thoughts to himself. Got paid £50 for the card, handed it to the police who turned up about 5 minutes after he'd bailed, told them what he was wearing, but he was long gone. Wow, both those men were tossers in the end. Several years ago, the day after Christmas at Target, a woman has 3 carts full of marked down Christmas merchandise. My scanner was broken, so I had to hand type each UPS code in by hand. Needless to say, it took a while. The customer snottily complains about how much I was inconveniencing her by taking so long. Finally finished ringing up her purchases, and she hands me a card. Declined. She had me run it again. Declined. Again. Sighing outrageously, she pulls out her wallet and flips it open. I swear the woman had like 20 credit cards. She starts wiggling her fingers over them like she's picking a tarot card. Hands a new card to me. Declined. Another card. Declined. Has me try several cards more. All declined. Finally, super frustrated, she writes me a check. In mounting glee, I tell her it's declined also. She slams her front card away and stomps out the exit. Lady behind her asks if her items are up for grabs. I say, yep, and proceed to watch as a horde of people ravage the contents of the carts. It was awesome, like watching sharks eat chum. I still think people are generally better off without credit cards because some people just can't be trusted. I had a customer that was yelling in multiple languages in my lobby demanding a refund onto his gift card. We had already made his drinks, but he said it took too long. Smoothie shop midsummer. It's going to take a bit as always. The guy wouldn't stop yelling, was trying to take other customers' smoothies to replace his, even though his were in his hands, all good. After trying to convince him that I absolutely cannot give him a refund on the gift card without the actual gift card and number, he finally walked up to the register, deliberately knocking over 2 stanchions with the guided rope between them, then proceeded to flick the 2 gift cards at me, both missing and going over my shoulder. The craziest part is in the end, he actually didn't pay on the gift cards. He paid in cash. Wanted the smoothies refunds put on these non-reloadable gift cards, but also to keep the smoothie. At that point, I went to hand him back the cards. He dropped his smoothie, one was mostly gone, and kept the other, and just walked out the door, leaving $50 in gift cards. Utterly astounding interaction. Yes, I agree. What an ignoramus. I had a lady break down and start crying. While she was in the line, she already looked like her world was falling apart. I don't remember what it was she brought, but I don't think it was more than $30, and the guy behind her offered to pay for it. More crying ensued. You know, I'm sure most people would feel sympathetic to this crying woman, but I bet there's someone out there, a Squidward of a human being, who's just like, okay, lady, let's keep the line moving. We've already established you can't afford it. Go on, leave. That'd be awful. But even then, as cruel as that might seem, it's not even the wrong response to have to it. I was moving from Tennessee back home to Ohio. I had my entire life in my car and it got towed in the college town I made a stop in to have lunch with a friend. I had $100 to get home, costing me $120 to get my car out. My friend covered the $20, but I only had a half a tank of gas to get home. Was counting change at the gas station I stopped at. Needed about $10 to get home, I believe, and started crying and having a panic attack. Went to the bathroom and came back. The cashier told me the guys behind me filled up my tank and to have a safe trip home. More crying, and it was just a really good feeling to know there are decent human beings in the world. Well, if I had an interaction that sweet on my travels back home, I'd be singing all the goddamn way. Just the other day, I had a lady whose card got declined. Her response was to try it about 6 more times, then it hit her. She forgot to take her card out of her pocket, and long story short, she managed to demagnetize her card. Her solution was to run home and grab cash, which wouldn't have been a big deal, except she ran her food stamp card first, and the register physically will not let me do anything except finish tendering. So I had to cash her out, return the non-food items, hold them until she got back, and re-ring them. And yes, she spent a good 5 minutes ranting about how I was conspiring against her until she figured out what had happened. Because a lot of people are asking, I couldn't key in her card number manually because I have to have the card in my hand to do it, and the customer refused to give it to me. All the while, this woman is accusing this person. She's picturing that if she accuses them enough, he's going to turn around and go, "Kuna dioda!" On the receiving end, I was working in construction pretty far from home, and for lunch I went to get an $8 custom sandwich from a fancy grocery store. At the register, my card got declined, and when it did, I immediately checked my phone and saw I had a zero balance. I told the lady, "Sorry, I can't pay for this," and she said, "Wait, hold on," and called a few people over, and she ended up paying it for me. I still remember her face. I tried to pay her back after my next payday, but she said, "No, I don't want it. I like to help, and I imagine no other people will do the same." I will never forget her. She turned what would have been a depressing day into something I will never forget. I was told to be quiet and polite when explaining that a card wasn't working, so when the transaction was declined, I tried to keep my voice down. Older gentleman with family asked me to speak up. He still couldn't hear me. His family laughed and said something like, "You daft bugger, the card's been declined." He laughed and said he used the wrong card. Fortunately, the other one worked. At least it was a positive reaction. Uneventful. All I have to say is, English? I don't know how it is now, but 20 plus years ago when I worked as a cashier, if we called in for a manual verify, the only thing we ever said was a code X decline. We were never told what the codes meant, but apparently one of them was a tip-off to the verifying team to send the police. I found that out when I had one that was taking an extremely long time to go through, kept asking all sorts of stuff like confirming our address and systemic delays. When the popo showed up, I knew what was going on. Phoning in for authorization was handy. In the 90s, I had a couple young guys come into our music store. "My aunt says I can buy a DJ setup as a graduation present." He proceeds to show me this handwritten note on a napkin. "I allow my nephew to buy a DJ setup as a graduation present." Naturally, he starts picking out the best of everything. Or when there were two great items, each with a slightly different advantage, he took both. The buddy had some stuff thrown in for himself as well. Full PA system, stands, cables, mics, the controller, the pile gets deep. So I run the card in the imprinter, make the call, actually to the police, while an employee distracts him with information on certain pieces. I hung up and told him for the high amount they had to call me back with the authorization number. It is typical, should be 5 minutes. Cops showed up, the kids turned white, they get escorted outside. Turns out they were out swimming at a local beach and stole the credit card from a lady's purse. I'm just gonna say, screw them kids. Like, it's one thing to steal physical money from someone, but to attempt to accrue massive credit card debt on someone else's card, that's just scummy. I know that the banks usually reimburse you if you get found being a victim of fraud, but they deserve a swift kick in the nether regions. I was 16 years old, working for minimum wage at the Jesus Chicken restaurant. A guy and his daughter came in and she was in a gymnastics uniform. They order and she starts telling me all excited about how every time she has an out-of-town competition, they try the local chicken chain together. Their total was only $16, but his card got declined. He pulled out a second, but it declined too. She looks disappointed and he tells me to cancel the order. But it was only $16, so I run to the back and grab my own card and run it through. They get their food and he lingers behind to thank me and tells me that he's going through a divorce and they probably wouldn't have gotten to continue their tradition situation if I hadn't stepped in. I felt good doing that for someone without expecting anything in return, but to my surprise, right at closing that night, my manager comes to the back and says someone is asking for me. The guy came back and gave me $30 and thanked me for making his daughter's day. Since a lot of people seem to have questions about the money and/or validity of this event, I'd like to address them. My card was a debit, not credit. Don't know why that matters. When the guy came back at closing to give me the money, he had plenty of cash on him. My guess is he had it back at his hotel. He thanked me for making his daughter's day because he'd been going through a rough divorce and his soon-to-be ex had most likely cancelled his cards and had been pulling stunts like that a lot. Hence the backup stash of cash. I paid for the food instead of having them come back because my parents had been talking about paying things forward in our family, and I wanted to do something nice for someone besides it was only $16. Jesus Chicken is Chick-fil-A. Yeah, I admittedly just wanted to know if Jesus Chicken was a real place, so I'm glad they answered that. I'm disappointed though. Not me, but an elderly lady in front of me at a Walgreens. She had mostly food items when her card declined. She was gracious and simply pulled a couple items aside. It went through, but I saw that the items were nuts and jerky. You know, protein sources. And I started imagining her being on a fixed income and being malnourished, so I paid for them myself and then found her in the parking lot and said, "Ma'am, excuse me, but I think you left this behind," and handed her the bag. I walked away quickly before she could say anything. I have another story about how I bought a guy a Slurpee at a 7-Eleven because his card declined for something that literally costs a couple bucks and my heart broke for him. I figure this is my neighborhood. These are my neighbors. I know what it's like to be broke as all get out. If I can spare a couple of dollars, then why not? Ooh, you big softy. I bought a girl that was crying a ticket to a big music festival after hearing her out. She'd been conned and lost €300. It would have been her 5th time and all her friends were already inside, but her ticket was declined. I still remembered the times that I needed to plan stuff like that in advance and save up. So I told her to hold on, made a few calls and told her to hang on, and tell me a bit about what she was looking forward to keep her from stressing out, telling her over and over that it was going to be okay. 15 minutes later, I got a call and a text with a scannable ticket. Walked in with her, brought her €100 worth of coupons, gave her a hug, and left. Now, my country is pretty small, but this was 300 kilometers away from home. I just felt like doing something nice and didn't want her to think that there was anything more to it. Almost 5 months later, she ended up finding me at my store. We talked, I thought she was cute, nothing more happened for another 6 months. A week before the festival, she showed up again. She'd moved to a city a few kilometers away from me for uni, so we lived within minutes of each other now. Went to the festival together and had fun. I fell for her badly. Asked her to go on a date with me while we were both high, ended up taking her to the fanciest restaurant at the festival. Had amazing food. Got pretty drunk later, and that's how I met my girlfriend. Definitely better than most stories, and it's not the first time being nice has paid off, but it's not why I help others. It's only 9 days until the festival, and I want to tell this story to someone. I might ask her to marry me. I'm a wreck right now. Haven't slept in 2 days. Just needed to tell someone. Sorry if it bothered you. I don't know why your story would bother anyone unless they're a petty, jealous, loveless little goblin man. My only thought is, while I am fairly generous, I would never spend that much money on a stranger. This happened to me and I was mortified. In my defense, it wasn't declined due to lack of funds or available credit. I went to Nordstrom's or Macy's to pick up a few items for a holiday. I think the item in question was a purse for my mom. It wasn't expensive, but it wasn't cheap either, like $250 to $300. I had placed the order online for pickup in store. Walk in, talk to the lady, get item, and go to the register. We tried to run my card, bam, declined. What? She runs it a few more times and still declined. I'm confused and a little embarrassed at this point. I call my bank, Wells Fargo, and ask them what is going on and why can't they push through the charge. They claimed the one I had expired. I read the expiration back to them and told them it was perfectly fine. It wasn't until later that the real story came out. Apparently, they detected fraud somewhere in my account, but no actual charge fraud, and decided to cancel my card and issue a new one. They did so without notifying me. They also said since it was a fraud hold, they couldn't push this transaction through, not even a one-time exception. I had to sullenly tell the teller that I would be back tomorrow. It was close to closing time for them. She gave me this look like I wasn't going to be back. That probably hurt the most. I went back the next day and bought the crap out of that purse. You go, girl. You buy that purse. You live your best life. You show that judgy teller. Not declined, but a card machine not working at Subway. Just happened a week ago. Walked into Subway, they had a big sign on the door, cash only, card machine malfunction. I, of course, didn't notice as I was on my phone. Ordered my sub and had an issue as I had no cash. So I went to the ATM down the street, got money, and ate my sub, no issue. Another guy walks in and the same thing happens to him. He also decides to go to the ATM down the street, only his card gets declined. He says it's because he was out of state and his bank wouldn't allow it. So he comes back to tell the lady, and she's really sorry. He gets really angry and walks out the door yelling, "Next time make the sign a little bigger so I don't waste all my effing time. Thanks a lot." I'm sure some people have had worse reactions to things like that, but I couldn't help but laugh. Yes, the sign could have been a little bit bigger, but when I walked back in after going to the ATM, I realized the sign was pretty damn decently sized. Could the cashier have asked each customer beforehand? Yeah, she started doing that after this guy was a butthole, but really, is it her fault that he wasn't paying attention? Luckily, I never come across this issue because I insist upon carrying at least a bit of cash around on me. And establishments that decide that they only take debit and credit card are frickin' moronic.
What went away because of smartphones? Portable MP3 players. I used to work in a warehouse and we weren't allowed to have our cell phones with us. Well, no devices with any cameras on them. We were allowed to listen to music and have one headphone in one ear. Everyone who worked there had a cheap MP3 player for that reason. It's more niche now, but there's definitely still a market for those. Audiophiles also love to have separate devices for several reasons. While iPhones are slightly better about it, Android is actually awful about playing high quality sound files, and streaming services chew through data if you want hi-fi sound. But a dedicated music player, especially if you splurge and get something like a FiO with the DAC in it, that's the good stuff. Even refurbished iPods have a decently sized market these days, although that's partially due to collectors too. Man, as I get older, I'm kind of happy that I got to experience the different eras of music, from Walkmans, aka CD players, to MP3 players, to now smartphones. To be honest, I love music, but I never really thought about how smartphones could affect the quality. I always thought it was more about the headphones you use to listen to the music. But hey, the more you know. Payphones. One day I was walking my daughter, who was 5 at the time. We came across an old payphone and she asked me what it was. I explained to her and she started laughing and said, "Mommy, they don't just put phones out in the park." It does sound absurd, but we did put them out in parks and plenty of other places. I think the last time I saw one was right outside of the local library. They were the last people to get rid of theirs. The ability to memorize phone numbers. I don't know my spouse's phone number, but I still remember the phone number of my best friend from the 1st grade. Totally had this conversation with my client today. I work with these teens. Turns out many of them don't save numbers in their phones, but end up learning the numbers and who the people are. Their reasoning? If for some reason something happens and they don't have their phone, they at least have the people's numbers by memory. Growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, my stepdad was involved in a lot of politics and labor union stuff. Dude knew pretty much everyone involved with that, in our city of about 500,000. And as far as I could tell, he had most of their phone numbers memorized. You could ask him random names, he'd sit there, think for a few seconds, and rattle off a phone number. This was when you didn't have to memorize an area code, so you just needed 7 digits, but still, it was pretty impressive. It's crazy how much you can remember if you actually train your brain to do so. I used to work retail, and at the time, I could have told you the number to any piece of produce if you needed to ring it up at the register. I also had about 90% of the store memorized, so I could tell you exactly where you needed to go to get something. It's all about repetition. Road maps, calculators, camcorders, privacy. The best part of every road trip when I was younger was when my sister was holding the map and then it got sucked out the window within the first 2 hours of the trip. Every damn time. Standalone GPS units for cars are fairly non-existent now. Yeah, but they seem to be huge for semi-truck drivers. You can go into most truck stops and they're still selling them from behind the glass for a few $100s to over $1,000. It's crazy. They let you put in height, weight, length, and even if you're hazmat. It's not like a TomTom. It has really everything you need to go anywhere in the country. I've never lost service with the standalone GPS. And if you're a local guy like me, you still need to figure out what signs you can ignore and what signs mean you're gonna screw up your whole damn life. It's worth $1,000 all day. The house phone with the cord that you can twirl up while you were talking. And later the cordless phone that you could never find until it rang. I always knew where the cordless phone was, and was reluctant to get rid of them simply because they were useful for calling my lost smartphone. Radio Shack and other stores where you would buy cameras, stereos, and recorders. This could be a consequence of internet shops rather than mobile smartphones. Dodgy UFO sightings and the Loch Ness Monster. Don't forget Bigfoot! Phone books, notepads, cameras for everyday people. Maps, atlases, the list goes on. Well, paper notebooks are actually still having record sales. My wife is a list person and she has notebooks all over the place. Using a dictionary to find meanings of words. When I was a kid, my mom would tell me that if I didn't know how to spell a word, then I should look it up in the dictionary. Even as a kid, I thought that advice was silly. How can I find a word that I don't know how to spell? Situational awareness. Drove out on an errand yesterday. Every single person walking, jogging with headphones, mother pushing baby in a stroller, dog owner walking with their dog, were all on their phones and not paying attention to their surroundings. This is actually the best comment in this thread. You forgot about the people actively piloting cars while their eyes are on their freaking phones. T9 texting. Dude, I think I have a vague memory of what T9 texting was and I never bothered to learn it. Would the equivalent today be like swipe texting? That's pretty popular. Printed MapQuest pages. Now that is a blast from the past. I totally remember having to print out MapQuest stuff. More than 10 years ago, I made a list of physical devices that have been replaced by apps on my phone. And here's the list. Narrator here. The list was pretty long, and I kinda just wanted to talk about some of the comments that were attached to the list. Oddly enough, books seem to be the first one to really reverse on going digital. For as much as I like my Kindle for travel, I still much rather have a physical book. See vinyl for music. It's probably due to the eyesore from reading from a digital screen, and the experience of being immersed into picking up a book without distractions. E-readers might solve the eye strain issue, but nothing beats reading print. Just the joy of turning the page to find out what happens next rather than pressing a button to flip to the next page, or the joy of placing a bookmark to come back the next day. There used to be so many different artistic cover arts. All these trivial things add up to the reader's immersion. Yeah, printed books are such a better experience. I am someone who likes to highlight certain things in books, mostly just books where I learn things. And I'm sure there are apps that will let you do that as well on phones, but nothing beats just flipping through a book and seeing the bright highlighted paragraphs. It's just so much easier to find important things. One word, encyclopedias. Bar arguments. No, Player X was the MVP in 1984. They're so easily solvable now. A fun 2-hour debate now lasts 9 to 14 seconds. I used to work with this loudmouth guy in the mid-2000s that would spout off made-up facts and figures during our lunch breaks. That grounded to a halt once one of us got smartphones by 2008 and just fact-checked on the spot using Google. I will say this doesn't really work with pathological liars though. They'll just say, well, I did it, or the website's wrong. Actual buttons. Rest in peace, BlackBerry. The need to just pick a random restaurant in an unfamiliar area and hope it doesn't suck. Also being restricted to only listening to what music is on the radio or on a CD in your car. For real. The younger generation will never know the hype of hearing your favorite song playing on the radio when you knew you couldn't just listen to it at any moment. Bonus thing the younger generation will never have to deal with is having to watch reruns of an anime hoping that you get the next episode. I can't tell you how many times that I saw Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z get his arm broken by Android 18 to only find out that the whole show resets back to episode 1. But man, that moment we finally got the next episode was so hype. Reading magazines while pooping. But if you've ever seen those videos about what happens when you flush a toilet, those magazines must be disgusting. At least you can clean the surface of your phone pretty easily. Photo development departments in stores. As someone who used to work in a photo place from time to time, this is probably for the best. You don't know how often people would go into a photo center trying to print copyrighted material, and we would have to turn them away and they usually got mad. Also, there was plenty of people that wanted to get their spicy photos printed at the store too. It was wild. Teens' mental health. I'd like to counter with everyone's mental health. Simply enjoying a moment. I went to a show last night and so many people were watching the show through their phone screens while recording it. In between sets, so many people would pull out their phones and watch TikToks and whatnot. Some even did this while the band was performing. I left my phone in my bag for the entirety of this show. I may not have captured memories, but I felt I was more involved with what was happening than those who couldn't set their phone aside for 5 minutes. It's the truth, and I'm happy I realized a good decade plus ago. I don't know why, but I love watching people take videos of fireworks. Just enjoy the fireworks. You're not going to rewatch the video. Honestly, even at sporting events, I see people on their phones mid-game. Sometimes just videotaping plays, or literally just scrolling through social media. I get unnecessarily annoyed by people recording fireworks. Fireworks are this full sensory experience of sound, size, and sight. It's a feeling in your body even. A phone video won't capture 95% of that experience. There has to be something more than just pointless recording. And fireworks have to be the top one for me. Unless, of course, it's a fireworks show gone wrong and they all explode at once. Now that's awesome. I will say, phones have helped us expose just how dumb people really are. I feel like every year there is a video of someone blowing off their hands with firecrackers. They explode, people. Don't hold them in your hands. The phrase, "you won't have a calculator in your pocket in the real world." Accidentally getting lost and finding something cool that you normally wouldn't have been able to experience. The expectation that you will be unreachable. The privilege of not picking up the phone and the person who called would assume that you weren't there. Nothing like when someone answered the phone and you just had to wave to that person to tell them you weren't home. Those were the days. Just enjoying the moment. Anytime me and my girlfriend are doing something nice together, she always wants to grab a picture or make a post on Instagram. If I kick up a fuss, she'll tell me that she's capturing the moment. But now the moment is tainted with distraction. I have physically wrestled my sister's phone away from her at family gatherings because she was incapable of not doing this, and using it to text updates / pictures to friends and family about what we were doing at that moment. And if you think that sounds like normal teenage behavior, you should probably know that my sister just turned 50 this year. This is a double-edged sword in my opinion because I have 2 aunts that do the same thing. They love taking photos. Not necessarily for social media, but just in general. It can be annoying, but it's also nice that someone is taking photos while everyone else can enjoy the party. Plus, those photos can easily be shared through digital albums. People talking to each other while eating. My father always had his attention on the newspaper during breakfast. And before smartphones, I spent so long reading books while eating that I still in a habit of eating one-handed as though I'm holding a book. Bro, ain't that the truth? Nowadays, people look at YouTube before eating rather than talking to people, or watching whatever's on TV at the moment. Every little thing we do is in our control, and it's hard to control. My sister-in-law's husband is notorious at this. He will spend all dinner with his face in his phone watching stuff, most of the time without headphones on. And often at a restaurant, so she'll order his drinks and meals like he's a 5-year-old. Or if we try to even ask him a question, he'll just ignore it. We'll have a conversation with her, then he'll interrupt whatever it is we're talking about, important or not, just to show her what's on his phone. And if she doesn't immediately answer, he'll say, "Did you hear what I said?" Or he'll just be a supremely butthead and say, "You always ignore me." Now a lot of this is because he gets away with it, and my sister-in-law enables it. And then there's the part where he's just a huge jerk. I got 2 things I want to say on these comments. 1, if you say the phrase "my sister-in-law's husband," doesn't that make them your brother? Why not just say "my brother"? And 2, what I think the original comment might have meant was people actually having conversations at dinner, for example, on a date. Things have gotten so bad that people play a game at restaurants where the first person to touch their phone has to pay for the bill. I would say if games like that are having to be created, phones are a problem. Patience. You used to have to look up a phone number, call someone, leave a message, and wait for them to call you back. Everything now is instant. People have completely lost all patience with each other, along with human decency. Knocking on doors when you get to someone's house. In America, that'll get you shot now, apparently. Horizontal videos. I hate vertical videos with a damn passion. My biggest screens are horizontal, people. You are denying clarity for those watching anywhere else outside of their phone. Also, I hate watching videos on my phone. Okay, I don't really have a dog in this fight, but I will say, the one thing that does annoy me about vertical videos is that they don't look nice when displayed. If you don't know what I mean, go check your YouTube sub box at some point, and if you're subscribed to someone who does shorts, the thumbnails for those videos are all lame. YouTube is starting to notice this by adding tabs to separate the content, but it needs to happen a lot faster. Humanity, manners, and the ability to listen to someone who disagrees with you. The coming age of boys that will never know the joy of finding a random spicy magazine. Newspapers. Been in the industry for a while, and it's unfortunately dying slowly. Daily circulation numbers are pathetic. Most store copies are returned and dozens of jobs lost just this year. It's a real shame. People's brains, sanity, drive, and a few other things. In return, we got 24/7 hour tracking. Not a good deal if I say so myself. My ability to drive without getting road rage. Every mother freaker that cuts me off and slows down or nearly swerves into me from the other lane, they're on their freaking phones. People who read books. Not necessarily all of them, but I rarely ever see them around anymore, and it's kinda sad. Imagination. Now, I could see how phones do hurt imagination, but I've always had this theory that some people have imagination and others don't. I've always been curious how many substance users have imagination before using substances. I feel like that may be their first experience with imagination, because they're usually going on some kind of trip. Conversations. Sure, everyone texts more than ever, but people don't seem to talk face to face. I see so many people standing next to each other looking at their phones, probably texting each other. The smartphone replaced the cigarette. We used to all sit around and smoke and talk to each other. I miss sitting for hours smoking and talking. That era is gone. Glad cigs are basically gone though. Lung disease is terrible, but we all lost convos along the way. I'm pretty sure that type of conversation still exists. People have just replaced cigarettes with other things. Decent games to a degree. The casual gaming genre picked up and moved to mobile, then it began to suck. Think back to the glory days of playing Plants vs. Zombies or Fish Tycoon on the computer. When it picked up and moved to mobile, it didn't immediately suck. Some casual games were mostly the same, just cheaper and touchscreen. Also, some new concepts utilize gyro and touchscreen controls in some cool ways. Doodle Jump, Fruit Ninja, stuff like that. But when data/Wi-Fi connections became more accessible, Facebook browsing games came to mobile. Think Farmville, Dragon City, Candy Crush. The free-to-play model took over, and now you're hard-pressed to find a decent offline game for mobile anymore. The classics are hardly even available, since they began to lack support for the newest Android/iOS update and were steadily removed from the App Store. Try and find Plant Tycoon, the original Angry Birds, or anything awesome you remember from the Advent casual mobile games. It's most certainly gone. It's probably been terribly recreated and made into a free-to-play model now. All I have to say in this argument is Konami, the company that created one of the greatest video game series ever in Metal Gear Solid, said that they were going to focus on mobile games aggressively. When free games like Fortnite are bringing in millions, why bother with great story games, right? It's sad, but true. Ability to speak in younger generations. I have two nephews, 18 and 15 years old. They can't fathom the idea of picking up the phone to call someone, to maybe order food, make a reservation, or even worse, calling your crush's house and not knowing who's going to pick up the phone. The genuine sense of panic they have just thinking about the world with no texting is just as alien to them as the sense of panic for calling is alien to me. To be fair here, I will say I've never been a fan of having to call to make an appointment or something like that. It's not the idea of talking to another person, it's when they ask you a question you don't have an answer to. Like if it has to deal with insurance or some type of bank number that you don't know. I just don't like the awkwardness that comes with it, and they're like, well, we kind of need that, and I'm like, I don't know how to get that, man. That's what I don't like about phone calls. People at the library. Not only has book reading diminished, but people used to go to the library to get online. Now that phones do that, libraries just seem almost deserted. Men having the balls to approach a woman they're interested in. That has nothing to do with smartphones, my guy. The plots of a lot of 90s sitcoms. There is a Sex and the City episode that comes to mind where the plot of the episode revolves around two characters waiting at separate entrances of a building, each thinking the other stood them up. The plot doesn't hold up at all in modern times because someone would have called or texted and they would have found each other in minutes. When two impatient people try to meet, they still end up not finding each other no matter how good technology gets. Character 1 texting, where are you? Character 2, where are you? I'm at the entrance. Character 1, no, I'm at the entrance. Nice gaslighting attempt though. Blocks Character 1. Character 2, tell me where you are right now. Hey, talk to me. Pick up the phone, please. Fine. Man, just thinking about it, if that sequence was in TV, that would be horrible. I think I'd rather go with the approach of the 90s sitcom. One thing I haven't seen on this list, but I think is definitely aided by the rise of smartphones, is customer service. Maybe it's because texting seems to be the younger generation's preferred form of communication, but I swear, customer service has never been as bad as I've seen it today. Also, I worked retail for over 5 years, so I know how much it can suck and how you just want to quit at all times. But I still tried to provide people with helpful service, especially if someone was cool or nice. But nowadays, people just stare at you like they're dead inside and want you to leave as fast as possible so they could check their phone again. It just kinda sucks.
Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit. What are your experiences, funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia, not safe for work? A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they're under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it, and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up, and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" And I told him, "Yep, both of them." And he said, "Both? Aw, you guys are great." Not hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a German POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her, now!" She always came back with another male nurse after that. Nurse here, this really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male, by the way. He wanted to kiss you. I hate this comment. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon, she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed the entire restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. Not the doctor or the nurse, but I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7, I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cued the following conversation. "Why are the Rugrats on?" "You woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry. Why did I want to be angry? You said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time." Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in the bed of the hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big, so they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying, "You're snoring, roll over," and I rolled right onto the gurney. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been in a ward, etc. prior to the operation. Hold up, I'm talking about this. I am ranting about this right now. Why do people feel the need to put etc. in places that it doesn't belong? It's one item and it's not even part of a list. If you have more than 3 things to say, you can put etc. at the end of it and have it make sense. But if you say, "I was in a place, etc., that's only one place. Etc. means and so on, and so forth, and the rest, etc. Redditors, learn to English. Now we can move on. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit and lay down, and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled, "They're right here," and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mom was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my sack is itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my sack. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down an excess of smooth skin, then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours, and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh, Mum, they shaved my pubes. I'm not happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's not right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified, and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time, it was a serious issue. So I'm an ER tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so with the EMT standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. Then, she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her, and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps and then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. I, since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and I'm forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old, 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued, my wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a freaking sloth in here. How do we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep and I yelled, "Whoa there, Missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred, "My name is Worcestershire sauce." No, wait, that's not a cool name. "My name is Shark." Wish I was earlier to this one. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his woohoo in my mouth." It was awkward. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth chief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. I had surgery on my wrist and came out of anesthesia screaming, "My balls hurt!" The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said, "My balls hurt!" He replied, "Dude, you had wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." 2 stories. 1, I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day, every day. So she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to bag you now." And she mouthed, "Okay," and I put the ambu bag on her face and force breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. 2. I was in helping with the heart procedure, and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up to the table and start chest compressions while they are hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the chest compressions, and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like, press, sorry, press, sorry, for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. 1. Going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this, I apparently looked at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said no, and I passed out halfway through my response of, "Aww." 2. Still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day of recovery. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face, to which I respond, "It's cool, I got this." But back in the bed, hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. I'm not in pain, but there is a fair amount of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they are free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later, a nurse comes flying into the room, looks, says, "Holy crap, be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figured I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I mean, he's not wrong. Kind of a W. I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth taken out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. When I got all 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, the nurse tried to put me in a wheelchair. Cue dialogue. "Let's get you in a wheelchair." "I got it, baby." Think Fetty Wap type accent. I'm very white. "Oh, no, I don't think that's a good idea." Tries to stand, but slams into wall and slides down face first. "Oh no!" She put me in the wheelchair and rolled me to the car. I giggled the whole way there while leaning my head on her hand and looking up at her face. Side note, hands down the best 2 weeks of summer I've ever had. KFC potatoes and ice cream all day while in a drug stupor? Heck yes. I hear I just played Minecraft with my little brother and dug enormous holes the entire time. Came out of anesthetic, and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me all about post-op care. She says, "Now this is going to be a pain in the butt," and I said, "If that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure." It was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse, not so amused. Not a doc or nurse. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to sleep." Not a doctor. A friend was in a car crash pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months and he had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on him, he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about it, he didn't believe us, so we asked her and she confirmed it. She said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. I was the patient, but I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy. In this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery, I half roll over and let rip the biggest fart in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse, ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground, she nods, and I go back to sleep. I was working in the pediatric ER and sedating a skater kid, 14 or 15. We're talking more a wannabe suburban kid rather than a punk. Kind of kid that obviously joined a frat in college. His mom is there in the room as he starts waking up once we had his wrist set and in the cast. His mom is typical well-to-do suburban mom who spends lots of time at yoga and PTA meetings, i.e. not trashy at all, and family was likely from a well-to-do part of town. My buddy, who is fairly hairy on his arms, etc., we don't need to have this discussion again, reached across his upper chest to grab an IV line. Kid was half asleep, raised his head up with his eyes still closed, and licked my buddy's arm with this exaggerated lick like it was an ice cream cone. Kid flops his head back onto the pillow, and his mom just looks mortified in the 2 to 3 seconds that pass before he slurs out, "Man, I sure do love to lick some." His mom immediately turned bright red and walked out of the room, and we all busted out laughing except the guy who got licked. The ER doc was this young petite girl, and she said she peed herself a little, she was laughing so hard. For months, we would give that guy lick motions in the air when we passed him in the hall and putting Rolling Stone stickers in his locker, etc. I still give him crap about that from time to time. My favorite is to catch him chatting or something, standing at the desk, and to lean over and sniff his forearm and ask if he's been fishing. Not a nurse, but I have a good one. It's been 15 years and I'm still horrified when I think about it. I have to preface the story by saying that I have a super conservative, girl next door type of personality. I am shy, somewhat of an introvert, and most definitely never want to be the center of attention on purpose. I went in for a colonoscopy with the yum-yum juice that made me forget everything that happened, although I vaguely remember talking and hearing laughter. When I woke up, people were smirking and glancing at each other, trying to suppress their laughter. I asked if something happened, and the staff reassured me that everything was good. So when the doctor came in to talk to me before I was released, I asked him if something funny had happened. He reassured me that I had a very normal procedure and then told me that sometimes the medication caused people to lower their inhibitions, but that the effect wore off very quickly, as does the medication. I asked him what he meant by lowering their inhibitions, and he paused again and reassured me that it happens to a lot of people. So yeah, I spent my entire colonoscopy talking dirty to my doctor and his tools. I never went back to that doctor again. TLDR, yum-yum juice made me say dirty things to the doctor, change doctors, and consider moving out of state due to my humiliation. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us, and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends, "This is the guy!" Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they're in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a corpsman's butt and hung on for dear life, who was the woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. TLDR, grabbed a girl's butt in the OR, got nicknamed by the staff, and became the talk of the hospital for a while. Edit. My top comment is how I perved on some poor woman when I was out of my gourd on drugs. Wonderful. I was the patient, but I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mom shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her, but couldn't get my mouth to work, so I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, "If I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big woohoo!" I've had a vasectomy, so this one is especially funny to me since they usually only use localized numbing agents. Unless he got a special doctor, that comment was 100% him. I woke up in a recovery room after having my wisdom teeth out and no one was in there with me, so I thought it'd be a good idea to get up and have a look around. Apparently I had been awake a minute before and asked the doctor for some water, but when she left to get it, I went in and out of consciousness and forgot all about it. They were pretty terrified when I just up and vanished. A few months later, my brother had his wisdom teeth out. We left the surgeons with no issue, but on the drive home, my brother lost his mind. I had to take a circuitous route home because my brother wanted to see the circus. Every house we drove past, he was pointing out imaginary animals and giggling hysterically. He was 17 at the time. Anesthesia apparently does weird stuff to us. While not medical, I was a prison officer doing an escort for and handcuffed to a prisoner having a minor procedure done under general anesthetic. After the procedure, he starts waking up and chatting about stuff. Then he starts telling me about his mobile phone he had smuggled in, the make and model, and how he keeps it plugged in his butt. Edit for those asking, I completed a security report and submitted it to the prison police department, I forget the names, and, as with the prisoner I saw swallowing drugs smuggled in, nothing happened. It was a small think phone. I think it was the Samsung Juke around 10 years ago, a finger from a latex glove to wrap it. I've been under anesthesia several times over the last 3 years, and no, I'm not a doctor or nurse either. The most recent time, however, I went in for an outpatient procedure where a stent was placed into a ureter, tube that leads to kidney. They go through your urethra to put it in, hence the anesthesia. Anyhow, it took more than the normal dose to put me under, and my wife later told me that when I came to, I was playing with myself and asking her if she wanted to take a ride to make sure this thing still works before we get out of here. The nurse was there at the time also. My wife told me she attempted to keep me covered for the nurse's sake, but I wasn't having it. I have no recollection of those events. Not a professional, medical or otherwise, but on the way home from the dentist, I was gone, and something in my mind remembered Metal Gear Solid, and I started yelling, "Liquid!" a la Snake. Apparently, I almost caused my mom to crash the car, and it quickly became annoying very fast, as one can imagine. Just coming out of surgery, and the nurse says, "I'm going to take your temperature now," to which I respond, "Will you give it back?" I'm not the medical professional in this story. My husband had emergency surgery a few years ago, and when he woke up, he was just different. I can't explain it. He recognized who I was, but his personality was completely different and the way he spoke to me was completely different. It's sort of like in movies where people wake up in someone else's body. It freaked me the heck out. 36 hours later, it was like he just woke up and was himself again. The weird part is, he had no memory of the past 36 hours. He remembers being sick and he remembers the emergency room, but after that, nothing. A lot of people came to visit him in that time period too, a bunch of family and everyone from the office, and he has no memory of any of them. The only thing that I can think of is that whatever medication that was used in the anesthesia that gorked him finally worked its way out of his system. Thank you for the new verb, to gork. While on fentanyl for gallstones in the ER, I asked the ultrasound tech if she wanted to take a selfie with me. She declined and I got butthurt about it. Apparently, I also told my sweet grandmother, when asked if I was okay, that I was, "Fine, Gran, I'm high as giraffe balls."
What event or incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or a mass quitting? All the engineers at one job I was in had their contracts changed so that they had to buy their own tools. Due to the specialist nature of our jobs, we were all looking at over £4,000 per engineer. 10 walked and the rest threatened to strike. The boss had to give in and buy the tools himself. They had their contracts changed? I'm not an expert, but isn't that illegal? Probably yes, but the boss was such a butt, he felt he could do as he pleased with his servants. Many times he would just have the engineers working on Christmas Day. If you complained about it, he would just tell you to stop whining or get another job. One poor sod was made to work the day his wife went into labor, and he missed the birth of his child. He wasn't even allowed to phone the hospital. In the early 90s, I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. One of the machines we used was called a mixer. The objective of this machine was to mix up the subgrade of a road. It had giant teeth that spin insanely fast. Well, my crew had laid down the dirt, lime rock and clay, and now had to run the mixer over it. Well, someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was even near the incident got fired. My whole crew was extinct. To put it into perspective, the cable was fatter than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. Total about 40 people that day were fired, and I was put on another crew. Man, that's gotta suck if you were simply the guy holding the stop or slow sign that day. The idea is probably that everyone on the crew has a responsibility to be aware of what's going on and notice egregious errors. Not sure that it's reasonable in this particular case, but it might be. I used to work at a pickle factory in Michigan. When the new owners took over, they insisted that they change the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' parents and grandparents had worked there and apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit and the majority were outside with signs the next days, until eventually they switched it almost all the way back. None of those who quit came back. I didn't quit and I actually enjoyed both recipes, but now I can't tolerate the smell or taste of pickles. I used to love them. I don't know what changed in your life to make you not enjoy pickles anymore. Perhaps having a wealth of them to eat at any given times. Anyway, hope you recover, strange pickle man. I work in local government for an urban county. One of the IT departments reclassified all their employees as exempt, a designation designed for political appointments, fired them all, only exempt employees can be fired without cause, and asked them to submit resumes if they wanted their jobs back. Their goal was to get rid of some employees they felt were dead weight. But it turns out the most valued employees, the ones with readily marketable skills in the prime of their careers, just shook their heads and had jobs elsewhere by the end of the week. Furthermore, when you pull a stunt like that, word gets out and resumes don't come flooding in. They are still trying to recover. I tried this with my dog. Haven't seen him in 2 years. Next time, don't pee on the floor, Baxter. Please come back. Worked in a bar in a nightclub. Restaurant by day, club by night. 5 bartenders behind the bar on any given Friday and Saturday, plus barbacks. Thought something was weird about our credit card tips. Went to the bar manager. We collect receipts and checkouts plus paychecks for a few weeks, examine them. Someone is withholding quite a bit of our tips. Fast forward to a Friday night, busy as heck. Owner comes in to see how things are going. Bar manager confronts him. Owner denies wrongdoing, claims what he's doing is legal. It wasn't, he was pocketing the withheld tips. Bar manager signals for me to come over, threatens to quit if the owner doesn't return the money he stole. Owner more or less says, TS. Bar manager walks out. I lean into the bar long enough to tell one of the other bartenders what happened, give the owner a snarky wave, and follow him out. 5 minutes later, the rest of the bar staff join us, and we wander down the road to another bar to commiserate over the bullcrap. Left over 500 people in the club with no bar staff. 0 Fs given. Found out a few days later that the daytime serving staff heard what happened and quit too. Last I heard, they had to shut down for a few weeks to restaff. Still overly proud of myself for that. Screw that guy. I was working retail and many of the workers engaged in mass exodus because the only manager anybody really liked quit. The way it happened was this. One employee was a recent hire. He basically got the position because 2 of his friends already worked there and they vouched for him. He regularly slacked off, got caught taking extra breaks, was never around when anybody needed him, and was generally a waste of space. One day, the manager everyone loves is on duty. He sends this kid out to collect carts from the lot. Now, a big group of this kid's friends have just arrived in the store. The kid goes and finds another employee and says, "Hey, the manager told me to tell you to go get the carts out of the lot," and proceeds to follow his friends around the store doing nothing. Manager sees the other employee collecting carts and asks him why he's doing it, as it's not his usual duty. So-and-so told me that you wanted me to get the carts." Manager, knowing the kid has a record as a really poor employee, is furious, hunts him down in the store and takes him to the office for a reprimand. After the reprimand, the kid leaves out the front of the store. He brings back 2 carts over the next 20 minutes. Finally, manager notices that we're completely out of carts. It's now been half an hour since he reprimanded this kid and sent him to the lot. So he goes outside to see what's up. Kid is leaning against the front wall of the building on his phone with his girlfriend. Manager fires him on the spot. The kid goes to HR to get his last check the next day. Sits down with HR manager and says that the manager everyone likes is selling illicit substances to employees, many of whom were minors, on work time. Then goes outside and calls the manager phone and leaves a message that he's going to F him up for firing him. The whole store goes nuts. There are accusations flying from management at everybody. Every single employee is pulled to HR and interrogated. Did this manager ever sell you substances? Have you ever seen him sell someone else substances? Have you ever seen him use substances? Have you ever heard him talk about using substances? No, no, no. And everyone they talk to points the finger at this disgruntled ex-employee. Everyone knows he started the rumor mill going to try and get back at his manager. The manager plays the recorded message for management that this kid left on work cell, but they dismiss it because there's no way to know it's him. Grilling continues for 3 or 4 days. Some people are pulled for multiple interviews. Gossip starts that they're going to fire this manager. They don't have any solid evidence against him, but this ex-employee and his 2 friends who still work at the store have provided stories that match one another. Well, no crap, they hang out every day and these interviews lasted almost a week. Enough that they think the manager needs to be fired. Manager doesn't wait for them to do it. He walks in one day and says, "Screw this, I quit. I drafted my letter of resignation when this crap started. Here's my keys." About half the employees on staff walked right out there when he did. Almost everyone else quit within the next week. The last I heard, the only people who didn't quit were the 2 friends of the kid who never did his job. Does anyone else who's ever worked a bad hospitality or retail job get the vicarious sense of joy out of these stories? Who am I kidding? You clicked the thumbnail for some sweet quitting fantasies. My mum used to work for a college. She started there as a secretary when the college was just starting out and gradually moved up until she was running the whole business department. Without her knowing, the college ran interviews and hired a woman to be her superior. They never asked my mum to apply for the position and never mentioned it to her until the day this woman is introduced to her. And my mum's boss informed my mum she was supposed to train this woman to be her boss for the department. My mum was clearly hurt and upset, but she needed her job and she couldn't quit, so she sucked it up and trained this woman while putting on her best face and being cordial. All the rest of the people who worked under my mum in the department could not stand this woman and were incredibly upset by the situation as well. One morning, my mum walks through the doors and the boss of the college is waiting for her. He brings her into his office and fires her. Within the month, the rest of the department all quit as well, leaving them to hire and train all new people right before the fall semester started. 6 months later, the woman they hired to replace my mum quit, and they had the balls to call my mum and ask her back. You can guess where she told them to shove it. I was hired by a man who owned 3 pizza chain stores. I trained at one store, worked there for a few months when I found out he wanted me to transfer to a different store, and after a few weeks become the manager. Woohoo! Well, the new store, the current manager, every single day spent a few hours on the phone with her significant other, screaming and yelling and crying, right in front of customers. The employees would get high in the walk-in fridge. I'm not actually too bothered by that if they actually did any more work than the total minimum. So here I am, hired by the store owner, not the manager, who had hired all of her friends. They didn't like me, they called me a B-word, a goody two-shoes, they were absolutely right. I fired all of them except for one new girl that started the week before I did. It was a glorious moment, the most B-word moment of my life. Mother frickers won't help me mop the floor, you're fired. Our company was bought by a larger company. The sales and marketing team got a new boss. Within a few weeks of this first meeting with the new boss, 75% of the team quit. No one outside of the team knew why. A few months later, I met the new head of sales and marketing. He was insane. When one of the top sales guys put his 2 weeks notice in, he was escorted off the company property within an hour. The next guy who resigned was told that he had to work the rest of the week with no pay so he could transfer his accounts over. Someone in HR had to explain to him that this is slavery and illegal. In conclusion, the new boss was insane and tried to bring slavery back. Our general manager was fired, everyone loved him, and they brought in a new GM who took away ending times to shifts, so we had to stay until he said we could go, while most of us were college students trying to schedule classes. And he took away all of the employee perks, we even had to pay full price on $1 sub day. Everyone quit. There were only 2 people working there 2 months later. I worked at Wendy's. One of the shift managers quit for personal reasons, so the regional manager had all the other shift managers cover the now open shifts. The shift managers were now working overtime and didn't want to. They gave the regional manager a deadline of a month to get a new shift manager. A month goes by and the shift managers confront the regional manager because there's been no replacements. Turns out he hasn't even posted a job listing yet. They were so livid that all of them quit on the same day. Now the regional manager had to take all the shifts until he could hire new people, and he did a terrible job too. Normally 4 to 6 people were working at a time at our location because it wasn't dead slow, but wasn't a hot spot. 6 only usually hitting a few hours overlap during expected rushes. With him as manager, he expected 7 people to be working all the time. This means he increased all of our hours as well, and had no respect for the hours people usually worked. This caused another mass exodus of normal workers, including me, because I didn't want to work full-time while going to school. I don't know if anyone else has had the boss that refuses to take a single step to solve the acknowledged problem in a workplace they promised to fix, but I have, and I still relish the day I shouted at them and walked out. Train company in Sweden. One day, many years ago, someone found a document stating some changes to overtime policy. It was just lying on a table in the middle of the break room. 1 copy only. Due to the nature of the business, there tends to be a lot of shifting hours back and forth. Sometimes we, drivers, can get home hours and hours early, and other times we get horrendously late. Hence, overtime. The document stated that now overtime forms had to be filled for when we come home early. Undertime, so to speak. This otherwise already scheduled time would be withdrawn, and the company would then be able to reuse that time. Negative overtime. 1 copy on a table, and a few hours later people had come in from all over in a major huff. There were outright and immediate resignations, shouting matches, phone calls to union representatives, a huge outcry overall. Date on the document and the day it was found, April 1st. Much fun was had. No one got into any trouble from what I recall. It was from the higher-ups, and pretty much everyone else in administrative staff knew about it. Still, they hadn't quite anticipated the crap storm. Even telling people that it was an April Fool's joke to their faces didn't work. Oh wow, beautiful from a very watch the world burn kind of way. I worked in a call center and they got us all together on April 1st and told us they were going to lay off 20% of the workforce, and we all chuckled. It wasn't a joke. April 1st is the first day of the 3rd fiscal quarter, midpoint of the year. Please tell me someone got in deep crap for that first bad joke. We had something similar happen. One day we got a mail from some higher-ups that the reception desk would now only be open from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. Some people got upset, stating that it was freaking stupid, they can't run a company like this, until someone, me, pointed out that it was April 1st. People in the office calmed down, realizing they wouldn't do something that dumb. Plot twist, the next day, it wasn't a joke. They were serious. In a team of 30 IT consultants that had been working a big project for a couple of years, the standing offer that governed rates, etc. had been defined and would continue for the next few years. But the renewal deadline for each of our individual contracts with the contracting company, middleman, was just a week away and we hadn't seen the paperwork, just promises that we were being renewed. Finally get to the paperwork and see a 10% cut in rates. Quite surprised because the standing offer didn't have any such change. Contracting company says the client department renegotiated new rates by saying that another company would be used instead. We were shocked that the client would put such a big project at risk. People made inquiries. It turns out the client department had made no such changes. The contracting company was just making a grab for a bigger piece of the pie. There was outrage. People quit. Other people yelled and got fired, etc. The company had to quickly backpedal and claim it was an administrative error. Yeah, right. But the damage was done. It didn't end there, though. About 6 months later, a small group of consultants on another project merged with us. They had been working under the same contract vehicle. As we're getting to know these 5 guys, one of them says, "That 30% cut 6 months ago was nasty, eh?" Turns out the company got from these guys what they couldn't get from us, and these poor suckers hadn't known it was fiction. Crap hits the fan once again. The 5 quit en masse. Problem was, their jobs were critical. They got hired back with hefty raises, almost double their original, if memory serves. Stupid, greedy company. I worked in the corporate headquarters for a large national retailer. After 20 years in business, the company was sold to an arrogant billionaire who put his son in charge. His first job after completing his MBA. The son decided to relocate headquarters 500 miles away, close to his daddy's headquarters. He gave us 30 days notice to move, with no moving compensation, or lose our jobs. Out of 300 employees, 1 moved. I accepted a new position the day after the announcement, and gave 2 weeks' notice. My boss went ballistic and said, "What are we supposed to do? No one can fill your job here, and we won't have anyone new until we move. You're not a team player." Bonus, the company was out of business within 60 days after the move, 4 days after the acquisition. They had spent $50 million to buy it. "You're not a team player," he shouts as he upends his team's lives on a whim for his own personal comfort. My goodness. Competing company in a similar but not identical line of business tried for years to replicate our product with no success. They scrapped the project and took the R&D money and bought our company instead. Fired 600 people in 1 day. I was one of them. I hear from those who remained the place is awful now. I was the lead cook in a $1 million kitchen at a multi-million-dollar high-end restaurant. The executive chef had been there since they opened and worked his way from the bottom to the top in 4 years. That place was his whole life and he was completely dedicated to it. The absentee owners had hired a do-nothing, know-nothing manager. After weeks of complaining, the owners had a meeting with the manager and gave him a week to get on top of his job. The chef went on vacation that week. The manager saw this as an opportunity to buddy up with the owners. A week and 2 rounds of golf later, the chef comes back to work to a pink slip. 27 out of 30 employees came in and resigned immediately after. Oh boy, I think I might have a winning story. When I was in high school, I took a part-time job doing tech support for a dial-up ISP. The company was pretty small and only had a handful of employees. The owner's wife did HR and accounting. Her brother was in charge of the technical operations and was my boss, plus a web developer and the regular tech support guy, who were best friends. There were also a handful of developers at a sister company which develops custom software. My work schedule was evenings a few days per week plus normal hours on the weekend. My boss was usually there before me on Saturdays, but one week I was surprised to find that the office was locked. As the day progressed, I became increasingly confused by the fact that nobody else had shown up. There was almost always a few people at least passing through, but I'd been there all morning without seeing anyone at all. Finally, after a few hours, my boss walks in and said, "You're probably wondering where everyone is." He told me that everyone except me, the owner and his wife, had quit. He wouldn't say why, but he assured me that it wasn't something I needed to worry about, and that, since his job was vital, he was going to stay at the company until a replacement could be found. I tried to find out what was happening, but he said I'd have to talk to the owner. When the owner arrived, there was clearly tension between the two of them. He also wouldn't tell me what happened, but was very eager to make sure I wasn't going to jump ship. Eventually they hired new employees and found a replacement for my boss, and things went back to normal. But I still didn't have any idea what the hell happened, and the owner clearly wasn't interested in discussing it. Cut to a few months later, I'm walking around the show floor at the Macworld conference in New York when I bump into the former tech support guy and former web developer. We spent a few minutes catching up, and then the tech support guy grins and says, "So, do you know what happened? Why everyone quit?" Me? "No, but I've certainly been curious. The owner didn't tell me and I didn't want to pry." Tech? "He and his wife got excommunicated." Me, blank stare. Tech, "Didn't you know we're all Jehovah's Witnesses?" Apparently everyone knew each other from church, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have anything to do with people who have been excommunicated. It wasn't until years later that I learned that the owner and his wife were swingers, and someone in the church found out. Plot twist. Listen, I don't think anyone should be excluded from a workplace for their private lifestyle choices if everyone was consenting adults and they weren't hurting anyone, but at least it makes for a good story. You remember Walden Books, the store in the mall? I had a friend who worked there as a store manager. They hired him to clean up the store. It was a total wreck. Dozens of unopened shipment boxes crammed in the back room, behind the cash wrap, even under shelves. He found new releases from 3 months back that were never available to buy. It was really, really bad. On top of that, the district manager who hired him told him he had 3 weeks to get the store in order without extra hours and without sales dropping. If you've worked in retail before, you know that this is impossible. My friend argues with the DM, and the DM basically tells him that he doesn't care if they work off the clock to get it done, it will be done, or he'll turn the entire staff. Fire them. So for 3 weeks, my friend and his staff worked 24/7, only clocking in for allotted shifts. My friend would even sleep in the back room in a sleeping bag, and miracle upon miracles, he got it cleaned up before the deadline. The deadline comes and the DM comes back with 2 LP operatives. They start pulling the staff one by one to the back and grill them until they get them to admit to working off the clock. When they get to my friend, she tells them outright that the DM told him to do it, and the DM sat there and denied the whole thing. So he says to the LP guys, "How else would we get this done with the deadline time allotted? You know what the store looked like before and you know how much time we had." The LP guys just looked at each other and then fired the entire staff. That same day, a manager and 3 associates were hired. The DM already had them in the wings and was just waiting for my friend to get the store in working order to pass it off to his friend.
Parents, have any of you regretted the names you have given your children? I used to work tech support with a guy whose name was Gandalf. In the 70s, when he was born, Tolkien wasn't even a nerd thing. It was a hippie thing. His parents were big hippies and loved the books. So they named him Gandalf. His sister's middle name is Galadriel. He said at first people rarely recognized the name. It was a weird name, sure, but few people knew he was named after a fictional wizard. Until the movies came out. He hates Peter Jackson. Well, for one thing, I leave Peter Jackson alone. The only people that individual has to blame are their parents. And the other thing is, I don't know, maybe it's because I grew up with a name that is very nice, but people bullied me and ridiculed me for it for years. But I don't know. I think Gandalf could work. I think they can make it work. 12 years ago, we had twin boys. We knew one would be Thomas after my wife's uncle, but struggled to name the second. For about 28 hours, he was baby B. When we finally settled on Jeremiah, 2 days later, we introduced them to our pastor, and he said, "Oh, cute, Tom and Jerry." I looked at my wife, and we were both thinking, oh, we did not just do that, but we left it. My God, the fights those brothers must have had. My friend's parents met during the 60s and they were/are crazy hippies, and they have practiced a lot of different religions. When my friend was born, they decided to give him 14 middle names: Dorsey, Abdul, Jaleel, Francis, Brian, Albert, Barney, Willie, Kowalski, Jeffrey, Faith, Lovestar, Breeze. He has a common first and last name, and they said all of that at graduation. Well, goddamn, they might have practiced a lot of different religions, but clearly the son took on Christianity because he honored the crap out of the name his mother and father gave him. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's a middle name. It's avoidable. I work in a social services agency that deals with children. The names I have seen are quite amazing. Along with random variations of names and brands of alcohol, you get some interesting biblical ones too. Like the 3 kids in one family named Meshach, Shadrach, and Abdenog. The one that I cringed at the most, though, was this poor little girl named Erotica. They are not even giving her a chance. Oh, this makes me wonder if maybe there should be rules where it's like, oh, what's your baby's name? Oh, it's Erotica. Oh, I'm sorry, man, but this baby is immediately being taken to Child Protective Services. I think my mother regrets my name. She wanted to call me Sebastian, but my grandmother insisted she would call me Sebastart, but with a D. She caved and named me Joshua. So when we had our first son, we named him Sebastian. I've never seen my mother so happy. My grandmother calls him by his middle name. I think I'm more interested in the story of why grandmother hates the name Sebastian so much. Is it the name of a lover who scorned her, a mortal enemy, a dog she didn't like? There was a kid at my school called Internet Castle. This is not a joke, by the way. Internet Castle. Hopefully none of these people like giving out absolute full names or anything like that, but I can't help but worry a little bit, and maybe the producers will confirm this with me or not, but are we kind of doxing people by reading these? Well, my mother doesn't regret naming me Shah. Doesn't seem so bad because it's a fair family name. But as my first name, it causes great confusion. For example, if I introduce myself to someone, I have to clarify that my name isn't actually Sean or Sean or Shaw. Then, of course, the conversation goes as follows. Yeah, it's spelled S-H-A-W, and they say, "Are you sure?" Which sounds exactly like "Are you sure?" in my regional accent. He drops an F-bomb at the end of this, but there's no real good supplement for an F-bomb just on its own. I work at a clinic with parental moms. Once baby is born, I help make sure they're coming in for appointments. I can't tell you the feelings I felt trying to schedule an appointment for Brenpen, the newborn. Brenpen sounds a bit silly, but I don't think anything's gonna beat naming your little girl Erotica. Like, it's gonna take something real bad for me to be like, yeah, that's worse than Erotica. My actual first name is Jeff. People think I'm from New Zealand and I'm saying Jeff. Thanks, Mom and Dad. It could still be worse. Consider your initials carefully. My surname begins with a W. My brother had a daughter and named her Jennifer Elizabeth. Pretty vanilla, huh? They got a ton of blankets and cups with Jew engraved on each piece. We aren't Jewish. That's pretty funny, yeah. My wife regrets my kid's initials, FCK, but I think his pickup line choices could be hilarious. My initials are FCK. All I need is you. Okay, yeah, that's really good actually. Almost on topic, my Nigerian friend was telling me that when he was teaching in Louisiana, the black people would come up and ask him if their names meant anything back in Africa. Apparently, 2 African Americans were named after furniture, but he was nice about it and said something like Proud Lion and Lord of Many. Line of them was probably for the best, but I'm just picturing him looking them in the eye and be like, "You are footstool." My middle name is My Love. It's not my first name, but it still stuns people when I first tell them. That was a little ha-ha at the end, and I just felt like doing a Scooby-Doo laugh. My mother and stepfather picked out and agreed upon a name for my little sister while my mom was pregnant. Her middle name was supposed to be Kate. Stepman never said anything about it. He liked it, was fine with it. Baby gets born, birth certificate is being written out, mom's exhausted, so she lets baby's dad deal with it. A few weeks later, mom takes a look at the new social security card and birth certificate and flips her lid because the middle name on all this paperwork is Lay, even though that name had never come up in discussion. She didn't even know until she stumbled across it by accident quite a bit too late. My parents are hippies that grew up in the 70s. Thankfully, I got away with a reasonable name. Jem. I've seen Jem in the holograms. My 2 younger brothers are named Conan and Torald. Our parents have never expressed regret over any of our names, though. I'm a guy, and my parents were inspired by Harper Lee when naming me. They were really hoping for a girl, and the first choices for names were Kitty or Jem with a G. My dad said they didn't think of any boy names until after I was born. Then they remembered the character in To Kill a Mockingbird and changed Jem to J-E-M. Voila! Torald. A pretty cool name. And what is with these hippies naming their kids after fictional characters? Even I have a name that's it's not specifically, but I share a name with a few popular fictional characters. My first name is just a letter. It gets better. I have an identical twin brother, and his first name is also a letter. We each have normal middle names, but letters is first names. It's because my dad thought it looked elegant, and not typical letters. I'm talking about 3 of the last letters. Thanks, Dad. Filling out any sort of paperwork for damn near anything is a pain in the butt. I know I can change my name, but I don't want to go through that hassle when I'm already used to the crappy name I was given. To answer OP's question, my dad doesn't regret it, but my mom wishes he would have waited until after the epidural wore off from her C-section to name us. The names are X and Z, so much for privacy. I posted this as a reply, but I thought I should address the justified claims indicating my mom might have gone along with the letters X and Z as first names. So I asked my mom why she was out. She's 5 foot and 95 pounds, she's an emergency room physician, and when the day arrived for my twin and I to be born, she didn't have any contractions. Typically, twins aren't carried full term, but here we are 9 months later in full term. The obstetrician decided that a cesarean would be the safest choice considering my mother was 40 at the time. The anesthesiologist administered the epidural, but it was too large a dose for my mom, seeing as she's such a tiny person. When my mother was having a hard time breathing, she told the anesthesiologist that she knew the area above the diaphragm had been numbed and started to panic because she couldn't breathe, and so the anesthesiologist administered a dose of Valium, so my mom became unconscious. When she awoke, she realized for the first time that my dad definitely married up. I ain't even gonna say anything about the names. In fact, overall, I'm not gonna insult people for the names that they're given or anything. The worst one so far, as I've said, it's erotica. It's still gonna be erotica by the end of this, I imagine. But goddamn, what's with these men and just not discussing with their wives what they're gonna name their children, or just going rogue? A friend's middle name is Baldrick. His parents thought it would be funny after watching too much Blackadder. For the uninitiated, Blackadder is a really funny English television series set around the 1500s because Queen Elizabeth is a main character in it, and then there was Blackadder Goes Forth, where it's set in the trenches of World War II. Anyway, Baldrick is basically a massive idiot who usually screws things up, or maybe inadvertently kinda helps in his own stupid way. My legal name was Carne Asada Jones. I had it changed at 18. They basically called him Sliced Beef, for those who don't know. You know what? I'm actually gonna give that name second place for worst name on this list. It's still behind erotica, but not bad, not bad. My friend and her brother are from Taiwan. When they moved to Australia, they were young. Their father chose Western-sounding names for them. My friend ended up with a relatively normal, if old-fashioned name, but he got her brother's name from a thesaurus. His name is Roget. Also, my ex's sister was born in Ethiopia, and whoever filled out the birth certificate must not have had very good English, because her name has about 4 times as many vowels as it strictly needs. And once I saw a girl working in a fast food restaurant with a name tag that read alimony. I have a mate whose name is Irwin. Not horrible, but his brother's is Irvin. Okay, personally, I gotta say, I actually really like the name Roget. I think that sounds cool, but Owen, there's nothing wrong with the name, and Irvin is fine too, I guess, but when I hear the name Owen, all I'm getting are flashes of that kid from bloody Billy and Mandy. My best friend named her firstborn son Jaden. When she told me the name, I asked her if she really wanted to do that. She said yes. That and her husband liked the name but wanted to make it a little different by adding an additional N. She now regrets it. The fact that she regrets it shouldn't bring me joy, but it does. Good luck on those biz cards, little guy. I am not quite sure what's actually wrong with that name. It looks a little bit silly on paper, I guess, but everyone in the comments below even is just oh, this name sucks. I knew a girl in high school named Cassiopeia. People called her Cass for short. I got why she was named that. Her dad was an astronomer by profession. There's not a single thing wrong with that name. It's kind of cute, if anything. I once knew a guy in high school whose last name was Sweat, and the poor dude's parents made his first name Richard. That's right. Connect the dots. See, I don't think that's that bad really, because it's just the nickname that everyone knows goes with that for some reason, but that's not their name. But, of course, it is unfortunate. My ex and I had a great marriage until it fell apart 14 years in. Up to that point, the worst thing we ever fought about was baby names and paint colors. She wanted our first to be Zebulon Zachariah. Not even kidding. We fought and fought about it. She was dead serious, and I was completely baffled as to how she thought that was a good idea. Finally talked her into a more sane first name and conceded Zachary as a middle name. Second child, she wanted D'Artagnan. Little Dart, she would say. Oh, hell no. We fought over this one while she was in labor. On the way to the hospital. She wasn't giving up. I won that one too, with something not common but sane at least. Third child, she was back on the D'Artagnan train. Fought for 9 solid months. Thank God that one was a girl. Okay, Zebulon, kinda ridiculous, but D'Artagnan, ooh, Dart. Darty boy, D'Artagnan, my friend. Nah, D'Artagnan sounds cold as fur. Maybe you could shorten Zebulon to just Zeb. That sounds kinda cool. Just Zeb, though. Do not put Zebulon on the birth certificate. I went to a summer camp with a guy called Raymond. Seriously, first name Raymond, second name Raymond. Naturally, we gave him hell for it. Me. So, were your parents drunk or something? Raymond squared. I was named after a very well-respected relative, actually. Me. So, were his parents drunk? He didn't talk to me much after that. 10 out of 10 roasting, I'll give you that, but see, this is why I don't really make fun of people's names or anything like that, because you do not control your name when you are born. I'm not going to take the mick out of someone for something that they didn't have a choice in. My husband and I had a deal. If it was a girl, I got to pick, and if it was a boy, he did. Our son's name is Loki. I'm not a big fan, but he loves it. I keep hoping it will grow on me. Norse god of mischief? You're just asking for a little Hellraiser at that point. Now I got that picture of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy in my head, where Billy goes to Valhalla and Loki is this skinny guy pulling on an elastic band, and Odin goes, Loki, remember what happened last time, as he points to his eye. Yeah, all you normies will bring up Marvel or something, but frankly, I'm so totally goddamn done with Marvel. We named our daughter Isabel because it was a name on both of our lists that matched. We wanted a long name, something regal but could be shortened up. We talked about Elizabeth, Victoria, those sort of names. Decided on Isabel. My only regret is we did this as Twilight was dying down and everyone assumed her name was Isabella, even after I spelt it out over the phone for them several times, with an E on the end, Isabel. People would ask and still ask, "Oh, do you call her Bella? That'd be so cute." No, shut the hell up. You know what? That would that'd be kind of infuriating. Not a parent and sort of the opposite here. My brother and his then fiancée were about to have a kid and they argued about the name all the way to the delivery room. He wasn't around when they had to do the paperwork for the baby's name and he was upset when she named their son Logan. I mentioned to him that it's not a terrible name, after all, it's Wolverine's name. About a week or so later, I hear him on the phone with a friend talking about how he didn't like the name until he realized that his kid is named after Wolverine. Ah, Logan, strong, manly name. It's a name you gotta live up to, though. My wife and I have a daughter that we named Jordan. I'm fine with that. My wife is a very independent woman and Jordan is kind of a strong name for a girl. Now we're thinking about having another kid, and if it's a boy, she wants to name him Michael. Jordan and Michael. Michael and Jordan. I'm 6'7", she's 6'3", and both very white. She somehow thinks it won't be weird if our most likely tall children are named after freaking Michael Jordan. I don't want to be answering questions or listening to jokes about their names for the next 20 years, though. I don't really get this dude's damage, to be honest. I mean, is that what people are gonna think about when you hear them or call them? It's like, Michael Jordan. Yeah, people are gonna think it, but it's like, whatever, who gives a crap? I have a friend from high school who has 4 kids. Oldest is Landon, perfectly normal if very popular. Second is Caden, getting more odd, but still in the realm of normal. Third and only girl is Kensley. Now you're just making things up. And she's due any day with her 4th, Brogan. I really hope they are done since the names are getting progressively worse. My cousin also just had a baby and I have no idea how to pronounce the name. Ellie, best guess is like Ellie, but no one can confirm this. Okay, well, earlier I said that you can name your kids whatever you want and stuff, just don't make it erotica or anything like that. It's like the people earlier saying Jaden with a double N at the end and stuff like that. I don't get the point of naming your kids pretty regular stuff, but being like, oh, it's going to be a regular name, but I'm going to add different letters to it so it just sounds the same. And it's like, what's the point? I guess this will get buried, but this thread seems to be filled with not answers to the question. So I named my oldest daughter Darian because my husband, then we were 17 and very stupid, wanted to call the baby Damien. And this was my compromise because I wasn't naming a child after the demon child in The Omen. Also, there was a female DJ on the radio at the time called Darian, so I thought it would work. Well, it turns out that Darian is most often a boy's name and very often a black name. My daughter is in her 20s now and she has never let me live it down. Everywhere she goes, people expect a black man. She's a nerdy, short, white chick. I swear I had good intentions. I was literally just thinking to myself as I read that Darian's more of a boy's name, isn't it? Used to work with a girl named Latrina. Latrine jokes constantly. Any name that has an easy joke to make is a bad idea. Poor kid is going to hear it 1,000 times. Oh boy, howdy, do I know that feeling. 50 years ago, the family a few doors down from me had a son. They called him Boyd. His surname is George. They are fundamentalist Christians. Bet they regretted that. So rather than Boy George, it's Boyd George? In Chile, we have an urban legend that in Valparaiso, one of our main port cities, there are many kids named Usnavi. Why, you ask? Well, being a port city, it is host to ships from worldwide navies from time to time, including the U.S. Navy. Legend says that any girl who gets pregnant after a night of party with a U.S. Navy sailor names her child with the name tag his theoretical father had, and that tag says U.S. Navy, hence the name Usnavi. If that is actually true, that's really interesting. I found a Verizon bill on the ground one time. Figured I would dispose of it in case it had any important information. Guy's name was Michael Michaels. Little bit silly, but definitely memorable. Not a parent myself, but I tried to warn my friend that everyone was going to be naming their kid Jacob because of the damn Twilight movie, and she was cursing her kid to years of sharing classes with other people of the same name. Her and I both have very common names for our age group, and she agreed that it was really annoying. And she also hates those Twilight movies, but she stuck to Jacob nonetheless. Sure enough, Jacob was the #1 most common name for the year her Jacob was born. Poor baby Jacob. Poor all baby Jacobs. Don't name your baby Jacob. I think this personal vendetta for the name Jacob goes beyond the Twilight movies. My mom was going to name me Tawny, as in Tawny Kitane, or better known as the chick from that Whitesnake video. It was the late 80s and my mom was 17. She didn't go through with it because when I was born, I didn't look like a Tawny. My brother was named after Samuel Adams. No, not one of the founding fathers of the United States, but after the beer. I don't think they regret it. I just think it's interesting to share. Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm not really feeling Tawny either.
My mom wanted to name me Stuffin'. What the hell is a stuffin'?
I don't know, bro. Maybe she just thought it was cute. My wife is fortunately somewhat more sensible than me and vetoed all of my wacky name choices, so I do not have a Shamalar, nor a River, Temperance, Winfred, or a Ford. I'm still a bit sore about Winfred and River, but I do concede that she had a point with the rest in hindsight. I was allowed more leeway with the middle names, and my eldest has the middle name Neris, as in Major Kira, which would be fine except that it's spelled exactly the same as a Welsh name, which is pronounced Neris, which is entirely not what I was going for. My son's middle name is Zed, so when anyone asks him what the Z in his name stands for, he can say Zed, which I thought at the time was really cool. Then sometime thereafter I came to the conclusion that it was stupid. Now I don't know what I think. He seems to like it though. Oh, and my daughter whose middle name is Storm is afraid of thunder and lightning. That last bit is pretty cute. Also, I don't know, I think some of the names this guy comes up with sound pretty cool. Not the namer, but the named. My rents named me Andrew, but it was recorded as Adnru. Apparently, my mother noticed soon after, but didn't actually care. She then lost my birth certificate, so I never knew. I found out when I got it replaced trying to get my license. I had to file court papers and everything to get it changed, and she thought the whole thing was hilarious. So no, my parents didn't regret anything. This has got me paranoid about my own birth certificate now. I'm an Andrea and I'm a guy. The half-Italian explains it. Didn't help growing up in West Virginia. Hey, that's a girl's name. Not in Italy, I explain over and over. I never had much of a nickname, but I'm pretty sure it's really stunted my life. People can't remember it or they say it wrong because they just don't believe it. It's definitely a big problem. Not as much as I live in New York City, but still doesn't help. What was she thinking? She's only third generation, too. She should know naming a boy a common girl's name in West Virginia was an awful idea. I know I keep alluding to my name and stuff, and this isn't about me, but I also suffered with people insulting me and telling me that I had a girl's name or likening my name to a girl's name. So yeah, this one kind of hits home for me. I know a guy whose name is Tony, but it is spelled Toe-Knee. That is so freaking dumb. No, that's the worst name. That's the worst name! For a smidgen of context for those of you who maybe don't understand, their name is spelled Toeknee. It's dumb! That's so dumb! My dad wanted to change my name when I was about 6 months old because everyone at work was giving him so much crap. My mom's name is Pat. My dad's name is Rick. My name is Patrick.
What do you miss about being young? No daily body aches or pain. My childhood house was on a huge hill. I used to stand on the top of the hill in my snowsuit and just jump. Anything over 8 inches of snow, I would just slide all the way down. I think about this often, especially as time keeps turning. Yeah, I feel this one. I get random knee pain every so often. Not sure if it's from working out wrong or just getting older, but legit knocks me out for like 3 days or so. I look like I'm walking with an invisible cast on my whole leg. I miss my hairline. As someone who's losing their hair at 16, I envy you. Oh man, where do I start? Saturday morning cartoons, being carried to bed after falling asleep late on the couch, highly interested in astronauts, space, and dinosaurs. Every kid was. Everything seemed bigger. The small fort you built was gigantic. The skinny high school student that seemed like he was 25 years old. All teachers were old AF. The toilet in your school felt like a scary dungeon. Playing in the mud with your siblings and cousins, while your parents were screaming at your face for doing it, but you all knew you were gonna do it again. You just knew everything would be okay because your parents were always taking care of you. And if they were angry with you, you could always just go to your grandparents. And of course, falling asleep in the back seat of the van while on your way to grandma's. The sound and feel of the off-ramp would wake me up just as we were getting home. Those were the days. Having more energy and my body not aching. Dude, energy. I could just wake up and my youth propelled me right into my day. Now I'm in bed for an hour past my alarm. I need 2 cups of coffee just to get moving. My wrists hurt after decades of using my hands repetitively for work. I get hot flashes, I'm unmotivated. I do things because I have to, not because I want to. As I get older myself, I'm curious how many people feel the lack of energy are also people that aren't very active. I think we underestimate how having a healthier lifestyle can really make us feel better. I say this as someone who has recently started taking their health more seriously. And man, I do feel so much better. Living in a world where it felt like the future was going to be better instead of worse. Honestly, as a 15-year-old, I gotta say I don't really think the future is that bright. Due to things like social media, we're being overloaded with negative information like climate change, oceans being polluted, inflation, high house prices, unemployment, and a lot more. Even really young kids, around 8 or 9 years old, are brought in contact with these topics, which is concerning in my opinion. I'm in my early 60s, and in the last 25 years, the media has been bought up by 6 different entities. There's so little difference in what they're all saying, and real investigative journalism has been replaced by PR releases. I've had to go to some YouTubers and some Substack people to get any meaningful news. On the bright side, I quit yelling at my television since I quit watching anything news related. I can relate, I rarely watch big news outlets. I watch people on YouTube and streaming services to cut through all the crap for me. The complete lack of responsibility. Yeah, I miss those days where my biggest problem was having to read out loud. But you can't know what a non-problem that is in the moment. Because back then, it was a big deal. As were middle school politics, failing a test, etc. It takes perspective to understand fully, which you don't have when you're young. Like seeing a toddler cry over a dropped ice cream cone. It's literally the worst thing in their whole life. I'm middle-aged and I greatly prefer it. Personally, my give a crap meter is broken and I have tools, experience, and perspective to actually deal with things. Either way, being a person can be tough at any age. Thinking that everyone I met and talked to was my best friend. This is quickly becoming my issue. I made friends so easily in middle school. Now everyone I made friends with is leaving, or I can't find new ones to talk to. If you need help with this, I would say join online communities if you can. Play video games with people online, or just try to do something new that involves people. This is the honest truth, but some of my best friends are people that I didn't grow up with and I met online. And yes, if you're curious, I have met them in real life. Not having to work. Oh man, what I would give to have 2 months off a year again. Being able to slam half a buffalo chicken style pizza with no consequences. Half? I know, what a lightweight. I miss the optimism and promise of a brighter future. Nowadays, it's all about holding on to what I have. Brain plasticity. It was so easy to quickly learn large amounts of information in my teens and early 20s. Now I'm almost 40, my learning capacity has slowed down significantly. I'm in my 40s. One thing that I've done and I still keep on doing is studying. It's like working out. So in my younger years, I had a very broad range in IT, from storage, servers, networks, OS, etc. So I've been studying that every year, 1 to 3 subjects. This year it was firewalls, I got certified, OS also got certified, and now about to do project management. Last year was a different OS only. Year before that was storage. Anyhow, you get the idea. I got 4 kids too, so it's a hard challenge. The takeaway is to never give yourself a break. Once you get stagnant, it's hard to come back. Since you are almost in your 40s, I suggest you take something easy to start and continue. I'm also a proponent of lifelong learning. I completed a degree in programming and web development during the pandemic. And I'm also planning on going back to school within the next 3 years to start working towards a series of degrees in entomology. I just accepted a job offer from a company that is willing to train me to do software testing and technical writing. It just sucks knowing that my next venture into graduate school won't be with the brain I had during my first PhD program, or even the one I had 5 years ago. I can still synthesize information just fine, but my capacity to learn information quickly and retain it just isn't as vast as it was when I was younger. It just now takes longer and requires more repetition to learn the same amount of information. It's 4 things for me: collagen, energy, motivation, and not feeling like time is running out. To be honest, time running out is the biggest thing I think about, and this is because I constantly compare it to things I want to do. For example, if I want to write a manga and get it turned into an anime someday, I heard that it can take up to 2 to 5 years to make 1 season of an anime. So that means I should have started selling a successful manga years ago. Boredom. Before Apple put computer interfaces in our pockets, Phones were mostly just phones. Boredom was common and also led to a lot of new experiences and serendipity. The lack of experiential context, aka not being jaded AF, and this innate desire to just use my body for things. I used to have an inner drive that needed to be expanded or I felt like I was going crazy. My innate desire is now attuned to relaxation instead. Mine's simple. My parents. Oof. I relate. I miss ya, Grandpa. Getting rock throbbing, well, you know, if you're a guy. Mostly a working pancreas. I'm 30, but being skinnier and my skin. Seeing aging on my face is hard to deal with. I also miss my old melons. I feel like mentally and life-wise I'm in a much better place now than I ever was. I just miss my physical youth. Oh my god, do you feel like it hit you really quickly? I always had it in my head that aging started at maybe 40, but I feel like my looks completely changed from like 29ish onward, and I agree, it's hard to deal with. I miss my old melons too. I'd love to have my physical youth back. I guess being creative and being naturally skinny. Yeah, same. I miss my waist and my motivation to be creative all of the time. I used to write a lot, and I also loved to dance, but then puberty hit me and I gained a freaking ton of weight. And I got bullied relentlessly for it by everyone. So that sucked. However, I would say I don't really miss my childhood. I now have more freedom in decision making and I don't have to go to the loud, overstimulating family or friend meetings anymore. Wait a minute. This person said they stopped dancing and writing because puberty and gaining weight? I feel like those are two things that you could still do easily. But I guess maybe the bullying played a big factor in it. 20-year-old me. I work at 7 a.m., so if I stop drinking at 6 a.m., I'll be good to go. Me now. How dare you suggest starting a movie at 8 p.m.? Being ignorant to how awful and hurtful the world can be. I guess I'm lucky. I'm 36 and I don't miss a damn thing. I'm better off physically, mentally, and financially than I've ever been. Beautiful wife and family. Self-employed. Life is good. Same here. Almost 10 years older than you, and I'm better, fitter, smarter, richer, happier than I've ever been. My friendships, career, marriage, body, and wallet are all much better at this age. No, I don't look 23, but that's okay. Preferably even. I find that people who are convinced that you get fat, frumpy, lonely, isolated, and achy at age XYZ are living in ways that reinforce that mindset. Yeah, I would have to agree with that last statement. I personally know a lot of people that have the ability to better their lives, but choose not to. And they often end up grumpy. That full-fledged confidence I had in myself. I was 100% sure that I knew absolutely everything and acted accordingly. Yes, it was absolutely obnoxious for those around me, but the confidence of 18-year-old me was unmatched. Now, I find this one funny because I was 100% this way. I thought I was going to win an Oscar and be making blockbuster films by the age of 25. Oh, how full of myself I was. I still want to do those things, but I'm a bit more realistic on how hard it is to get to that point. Also, being a content creator, I have some younger viewers that think like this now, and it's funny to see that confidence, or better, ignorance, knowing that I was once the same way. My metabolism. Just so you know, if you drag yourself to the gym a few days a week and put on some muscle, you'll raise your metabolism. Not just from the exercise itself. Once you build some muscle, you burn more calories at rest too. There are a lot of 50-year-olds at the gym who look and feel great. It just doesn't come free anymore. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if any of that's true, but I can say working out does make you feel better. When you're in school and it sucks, you can think to yourself that it's just a temporary ordeal on a way to something better. And there's a sort of general idea of the path you're on. When you're in a crappy job, you can quit and look for another crappy job, but there's nothing other than jobs that you're heading towards for the next half century or so. Even if you're in a good job, sooner or later, you just get more stuff piled on you until it becomes a bad job, at least in my experience. I agree and disagree with this. I did have a super chill job before becoming a content creator, but over time it beat me down and it made me question what I was doing with my life. Nothing is more motivating, in my opinion at least, than seeing the years fly by and seeing that you aren't any closer to your goals. It'll make you reevaluate your life and desires. As for the getting a good job or sooner or later it'll become a bad job, I don't think I agree with that. I really enjoy my current job over any other job that I've had. And if there's things I don't like about it, I try to find ways to improve it. I don't know, if I'm still doing this in a few years, maybe I'll think differently, but right now, I think it's pretty awesome. Waking up and knowing that I could realistically end up doing something completely unexpected that night. I could end up at a concert, some crazy road trip, a festival we just discovered, etc. That and the music. Life is so boring now. I technically still do all the fun stuff I used to, but after 2020, I'm just super anxious about everything. The simplicity of life. When I was a kid, a perfect day kind of looked like this. Wake up when I want, spend the morning at either the library or the comic store, go home for lunch, head out with some buddies to get up to no good for a few hours, head home for dinner, read some books/comics I picked up earlier that day, then finish the day with a gaming session on the console. I didn't know any better. That was just life. Now, if I have a day like that, I need to plan ahead like 2 weeks in advance. Clear my entire schedule, turn off my phone for the day, make sure all the meals are prepped ahead of time, or go out to a fast food joint. And then I can have a day that kind of resembles that. I need to put in the mental energy and planning just to have a real day off. And I don't have kids, so I get to do that every once in a while. If I did have kids, I would never have a day off. That's a 24/7 job. I can't even imagine it. The idea of stressing out and planning my whole day off is counterintuitive to the concept of it. But if I don't do it that way, it's not gonna happen. You know, I can totally relate to this. I am a workaholic, it feels like, and if I do have a day off where I'm not working the job that actually pays me money, I'm still doing something along the lines of like writing for a comic book or trying to write a short film or just streaming. I can't really remember the last day I just had a day off to do nothing. It definitely needs to be planned. The ability to enjoy things without thinking about the inner workings of things. Nowadays, it's hard to really enjoy anything without thinking about the people behind it, the corners they cut, the agenda they're trying to push, etc. It's really hard to innocently enjoy anything anymore the older I get because the mythicism of everything kind of fades away in the understanding that someone is behind this, and it sucks. Knees. Honestly though, I'm 33 and I'm now in the washed up athlete bucket. I miss the days where I could go ham and wake up the next day feel like nothing happened. Sleeping. Years of shift work and being emergency response for stuff has left me with the inability to sleep properly. My woman says the butterfly in my spirit animal has given up because of how lightly I sleep and how instantly I'm ready for action if disturbed. It's a real bastard. Not much, truthfully. I'm a better person now overall, in better shape, figured out school, and I'm married with 2 wonderful kids. My hobbies are still there, but now I get to share them. Okay, maybe I miss my old Saturday morning cartoons. Looking at you, Reboot and Beast Wars. Dude, I tried watching Beast Wars as an adult, and I couldn't get past the cringe dialogue in the first few episodes. I remember loving that show as a kid, but it's so dated now and I don't want to try watching it again and ruin any of the nostalgia I have left. Saturday morning cartoons were dope though, definitely programmed us to look forward to the weekends. I am so glad that somebody mentioned the show Reboot, because for anybody that doesn't know, basically it was like a 3D cartoon. But the craziest thing about Reboot was the ending was in the name of the show. Spoiler alert for a show that's over 20 years old, but the finale of the show has all the characters die because the computer they're in gets rebooted. Thinking about that as I got older, I was just like, dude, that was pretty morbid for a kid's show. Wild stuff. Perfect eyesight. As someone who got glasses during the pandemic, because I thought it was a product of panic attacks, I will say the clarity that I have with them on is insane. Really made me feel my age for that moment. Absolutely not giving a flying crap about playing video games all day, every day for weeks. And with the boys. Nowadays, me and the boys are busy with work, and when it's not work, it's our romantic partners. Haven't gamed with the boys for more than an afternoon in years. Being able to make friends because, hey, we're similar ages. Even in my 20s, I would go out into a different city and just blend in and party with a gang of similar age strangers. No problem. The joy of Pokemon. I mean, now at 29, I still play Pokemon, but I have vivid and joyful memories of playing Pokemon Yellow in the car coming home from my grandparents on my Game Boy. The streetlights kept me being able to play the game. The feeling of pure happiness when I got myself, by myself, through the forest on my way to challenge Brock. Dude, same. I feel this completely as I am a similar age to you. Pokemon Go was also so good a few years back. Lack of worries. I missed the days when my worry was if my crush was going to notice me that day. Now I worry about having enough money to one day buy a house and support future kids. Having time to clean my house, eating healthy to avoid health issues, doing well in my career, while maintaining friendships. It's not necessarily what I miss about being young, but as a kid, I always wished that I was 16, 18, 21, pivotal ages in a person's life. But now that I've been all of those ages, I'd give up so much to go back 10 years where life was just innocent. 2 big reasons or timelines. Being under 13. I really miss how simple life was. Nothing but playing video games, hanging out with friends, going fishing, and playing in the woods. Just good old-fashioned kid stuff. Every day was a little adventure. After 13 and on through college, life definitely wasn't as simple, but you still have your whole life ahead of you to look forward to. The possibilities for future are limitless. Now at 37, I look at life as being middle-aged. I live a great life, but I definitely long for my youth. Our parents are facing their morality, and I look at life as being closer to the end than the beginning now. It sounds morbid, but it's the reality of things. My friends are fat, bald, or both. People have been married and divorced, including myself. People have died, pets have died, and we move on. Life just doesn't have the magic it did when we were young, and there isn't a nostalgia rabbit hole satisfying enough to truly take me back. Well, damn. Now I'm depressed. Why not end the video talking about what I miss about being young? I heard a lot of people talking about their looks and how they feel physically. I have to say, I don't mind the way I look right now. My mustache actually looks pretty great compared to when I was younger, and my hairstyle has definitely improved. If I eat healthy and work out regularly, I feel pretty great. But I think the one thing I really miss about being young was the simplicity of everything. You never had to defend why you liked something or why you thought something was the best thing ever. You didn't have a million questions on why your crush didn't like you. It was because she didn't like you or think you were cute enough. Simple as that. Whereas today, you end up asking yourself, did they not find me attractive? Was it because they didn't like my job or where I live? Was it my laugh? Maybe she didn't like the way I dressed. Maybe it was because I said something that she didn't agree with. And so on and so on. But one thing that I didn't see on this list today was the lack of choices. I miss when I only had one video game to play because I became the greatest player at that game. I was doing speed runs of games before I even knew what speed runs were. I came from a family that couldn't buy new video games all the time, so I got one and I played it until you couldn't play the game anymore. Nowadays, great games are being released for free in hopes that you make in-app purchases. So many amazing games come out now that I beat them once and I move on to the next because I don't have time to collect every trophy in the games anymore. Oh, there is 10 different alternate endings to this game? I guess I'll watch the other 9 on YouTube. There used to be this thrill that came with playing the same game over and over again. Now that is definitely something that I wish I could experience again. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Link at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.